We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Yo guys! Part 2 of What If Naruto Was a Mad Scientist. Long ago the world was full of amazing technology, things ninja could only dream of. For centuries this ancient art was lost. That is until a nosy blonde found it in a dusty tome. Now he follows in their footsteps, those of a mad scientist. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 3, Explosions Make Everything Better. It was just another day in Konoha. Okay, maybe there were just a few differences. The figure leaped far above the streets of Konoha, silver hair rustling in the wind. Though it couldn't be seen under the mask perpetually covering his face, Kakashi's mouth was twisted into a definite half-scowl. Looking below him, he could already see the citizens making their daily rounds as he quite literally bounded across the tops of the buildings. He just didn't understand it. Here he was, looking for one of his idiot genin. Him, the great Kapinin Kakashi Hitaki. And all because that little blonde brat was late. How dare he be late? Kakashi had even only showed up 2 hours late this time instead of his customary 3. But Naruto hadn't showed hide or hair of himself at Team 7's meeting ground for nearly a half hour after his arrival and was now considered late, something that no confident or proud shinobi would do. Yes, Kakashi obviously chose to ignore the irony in this thought. It had been 1 week since he had become the jounin instructor of Team 7, and he was no closer to understanding the enigma that was the insane Jinchuriki than when the boy had first nearly blown him up. The Hokage wasn't joking when he had said that Naruto was troublesome. It was like trying to hold a tsunami inside a jam jar only to be surprised when the jar shattered and you got swept away. No matter what Kakashi did, he just could not seem to pick apart Naruto's thought process. Sasuke and Sakura were simple by comparison. One was driven by revenge and the other by idol worship. But Naruto. The boy did not have one single button that could be consistently pressed. He switched between reason and chaos at the drop of a hat, and more than once Kakashi found himself wondering just what the hell he had gotten himself into. He remembered a few things that had happened earlier in Naruto's childhood when he was chosen as an ANBU bodyguard. The mayhem, the mischief, the horror, and, ye gods, the random explosions. It was hard not to see the QB inside Naruto as the preteen was such an obvious pyromaniac. Why Naruto had been making paper airplanes out of explosive tags he'd never know, but Kakashi prayed that Naruto's creative imagination wouldn't attempt something like a small-scale aerial assault on the merchant sector again. This was part of the reason for the hellish training of Kakashi's team. For the past week he had been whipping them into shape through a grueling training regiment that would make Madogai cry youthful tears of joy. Running 50 laps around Konoha followed by a dozen sets of 100 push-ups, sit-ups, squats, etc. was the basic plan. With time, he would keep boosting their physical training until just their basic taijutsu would make them absolute monsters. Add to that their daily D-rank missions and the little shinobi and kunoichi should have been utter darlings as they passed out from fatigue. But that little empty-headed brat just would not go down. Unlike his teammates who seemed on the verge of exhaustion only halfway through their initial training, Naruto was still as fresh as a daisy throughout the entire practice. He actually looked excited over the idea of more torture-sorry training. Kakashi could not understand it. Naruto had more stamina than most Chunin combined. What horrible past deeds had Kakashi done to be stuck with the equivalent of a supernova as one of his pupils? How could he possibly show his tenderness and caring nature as a teacher if the child refused to break down into a blubbering, vomiting mess? He wanted his petty revenge, damn it. And on top of Naruto's incredible endurance, the various quirks that pervaded his personality were like the deadly poison found on a nail-encrusted baseball bat. Like his sleeping disorder. A chill wind blew. Kakashi shivered in mid-bound as that memory came up. He really wished he had read the documents on Naruto's progress in the academy, but he had originally believed that controlling the little munchkin would be an easy task. Oh, how wrong was he? It was during their 3rd day as a team. Kakashi had decided to give a quick lecture on the advantages of teamwork between the genin when he was rudely interrupted by a subtle snoring emanating from Naruto. Looking over at him, Kakashi was both amused and irked by what he saw. The blonde had fallen asleep on his feet. Well, he couldn't have that, now could he? He'd just have to show him who was the student and who was the sensei. If only he had taken note of how Sakura and Sasuke were quickly inching away from the sleeping blonde, he could have saved himself a lot of trouble, time, and pain. Kakashi hadn't. The result was obvious. Reaching over to flick the boy on the forehead, and thus wake him up, Kakashi found himself experiencing the all too delightful sensation of spontaneous combustion. No signs, no flare of chakra, nothing. Just 1 second perfectly inert, and the next perfectly swathed in flames and screaming as he threw himself into the stop, drop, and roll maneuver. And Naruto just slept through the entire event while Sakura and Sasuke fled. There was still a small patch on his left thigh that wouldn't grow hair after the intense inferno brought down upon him. From then on, Kakashi made sure to look up any information he could find on Naruto. He was sure he would live a long and healthy life if he did so. Plus, his Ika-chan wouldn't have to suffer the consequences of his negligence. Oh, poor Volume 22. Nami-chan would so hate him for being so very, very careless. There were also those Kinzoku jutsu to consider. Kakashi had no idea where Naruto had discovered them, but it was clear to him that such technology was very rare in Konoha and probably in all the elemental countries as well. Even the chakra armor and mechanical devices used in Snow Country had nothing on the intricacies that he could glean from the few times he had seen the items. What were they? How did Naruto know of them? How could he even create such wondrous tools? Kakashi had a million questions and no answers for them. Naruto was extremely secretive about his inventions, giving only capricious grins and half-delirious riddles in response to Kakashi's probing. Kakashi had even thought about making it an order for Naruto to explain everything. He was now the Jounin soldier, after all, and would have to tell all so that Kakashi could make an accurate assessment of his skills. And yet, he hadn't announced the order. Why? Maybe it was because Kakashi himself wasn't able to bring himself to share all of his skills with his own Jounin sensei. Maybe it had to do with the strict dressing down Sarutobi had given him prior to his first meeting with his team. Or maybe it had to with the fact that Kakashi was actually scared of what the answer would entail. If Naruto was a psycho from fiddling with such devices, what effect would they have on Kakashi? Ika. Teehee. Cough, right, moving on. Kakashi slowed to a stop as he reached his destination. Looking in front of him, he stared at the perilous Uzumaki mansion, 8 floors of psychotic crazies, metallic monsters, and unknown atrocities. The apartment building loomed over its neighbors, waiting to devour any who showed weakness. Hell, it even had the obligatory ominous clouds sparking with lightning above. Wait, what? The hell? There actually were thunder clouds above the building, and only above that building. They hovered a couple meters directly over the roof, none floating any further than perhaps a few feet out from the roof's edge. It was like they were there exactly for the purpose of adding a foreboding atmosphere. Kakashi suppressed the shiver traveling down his spine. There was just something so wrong with this scene. Shaking his head, he leapt across the street to an open window. Kakashi meticulously scanned the room before he was adequately satisfied. Good, no traps, and those little metal freaks aren't anywhere to be. Yo! Bakashi-sensei, huh? Kakashi looked down only to have something slam into his face, bursting upon contacting and splashing him with some viscous and unknown liquid. He blinked once, twice, and then wiped his face off. In front of him was one of the Nerukuns, J by the letter hammered on its chest, standing at attention with a large barrel sticking partway out of its mouth. The barrel receded, and the Nerukun gave a crisp salute with its stubby arms. Welcome. Would you like a complimentary towel with your greeting? Kakashi didn't know if it was possible, but he could swear that the clank was smirking at him. Why you little, he was cut off again as a small hand towel smacked into his face. Growling, he tore it off only to discover that the Nerukun had disappeared somewhere back into its villainous hive. Please enjoy your stay here at Naruto Incorporated, future ruler of the world. When finished, fill out the suggestion card so that we can make your next visit more enjoyable. Have a nice day. Kakashi glanced at the towel, which actually did have a little suggestion card neatly tucked into a side pocket. On it were various questions like, did you enjoy your visit? Would you like to join us in world domination? And how much wood could a woodchuck chuck with a chainsaw and 5 pounds of TNT? Tearing the card into as many pieces as he could, Kakashi forced himself to calm down as he slowly wiped his face off with the towel. This time it looked like rainbow-colored paint. Last time he had come it was tar and feathers, and the time before that it was heavy-duty catnip in spray form. The kitties, oh those amorous kitties. He clenched his fist tightly and ground his teeth together. Oh, he would get those little monsters. He would make them pay, especially that J1. He would enjoy putting a Chidori through its metallic little heart, over and over again. Shaking his head, Kakashi directed himself back to the task at hand. First he had to find his AWOL student, then he could disassemble J into as many individual parts as possible before tossing them into the fires of Empty Hanru in Earth Country. That would teach the little bugger. His head swiveled to one side as something caught his ears. It sounded like muffled laughter and giggling. Following the sound, Kakashi walked down the hallway and one flight of stairs before he saw what looked like smoke sifting out a door. His ninja training kicking into high gear, Kakashi dashed to the door and kicked it open, thanking the heavens that his mask didn't just make him look cool and impress the ladies but also doubled as a filter. Naruto! He shouted, fearing the fool had finally blown himself to pieces. You in here? He wasn't sure if what he found actually assuaged his fears or just made brand new ones. Gurk. Naruto was okay, albeit apparently stoned out of his mind. What really screwed the image up was that Anko, bloody ex-apprentice of the traitor Orochimaru, stabby fetishist, and all-around sadistic sociopath Anko, was in the same state and also molesting said Jinchuriki as she tickled him mercilessly in places people nearly twice your age should not tickle. Now normally, in a situation like this, Kakashi would just liken it to something he found in the Ika Ika series and giggle absently. But there was something about this image that just touched some deep primal facet of him, something that just screamed wrong. Oh, God, so wrong. So he simple could not. Instead, his jaw went slack and he just stared as the wrongness continued. Naruto's giggling trailed off as he finally noticed another occupant in the room. Oh, hey, Kakashi-sensei, BWA hahaha. What are you, Shchitin, doing here? You wanna get in on this, too? No, Enko whined throatily as she groped at the blonde. You're all mine, Naru-chan. No one else. Kakashi subtly closed his mouth and put his fingers to his forehead while his brain tried to process and then delete what he was seeing. Naruto, what in the nine hells are you doing? Just Enkoheim, stop that. Just an experiment, gone awry. I was playing with chemicals and Enkoheim, hey, not there, decided to surprise me, Ann. The boy's lips trembled and he suddenly cut himself off as he fell into tumultuous laughter, Enko taking the opportunity to pin him to the floor. Ann. Kakashi didn't know why he was just standing there while Enko was trying to deflower Konoha's greatest secret and deadliest citizen, but he figured that, despite the sheer wrongness of it all, every shinobi deserved to get it on with a hot, older kunoichi. Kakashi has a very skewed sense of morals and ethics. A lifetime of reading nothing but porn will do that to you. Nitrous oxide, Naruto managed to gasp out before he succumbed to Enko's attacks. Laughing gas. The boy was wasted off his ass with laughing gas. Kakashi took a quick glance around, and for the first time noticed that the room they were in swarmed with all kinds of beakers, test tubes and chemicals. A fat stack of papers, books, and such was piled off to the side of the room, mirrored by a large blackboard that had several chemical equations scribbled haphazardly on the opposite side of the room. Naruto must have been doing something with chemistry when Enko ambushed him and then, well, boom. Seeing that the windows were shut tight and he had to kick the door in, it wasn't surprising that the two got wasted so damn easily. Okay, that's enough playing around. We have to get back to your teammates, N. Kakashi blinked when he noticed that Naruto was no longer there and Enko was leering at him, intently. What just happened? Hey, look, I'm Kakashi. The Jounin turned around to see Naruto dancing recklessly as he covered his mouth with a cloth and held a familiar orange book in his hand. Kakashi instinctively grasped at the pocket where he kept it, his lone visible eye widening when he didn't feel it there and locking onto Naruto. I read pornographic material in highly inappropriate situations. Enko snorted drunkenly and clapped her hands together at the younger male's imitation. Kakashi's ire grew but he swallowed it and put on his infamous smile. The Uzumaki was going to pay for that. Dashing forward, he stole the novel back and shoved it into his pants quicker than Naruto could blink. The boy reacted by jumping forward and hiding behind Enko, smiling smugly at the older shinobi. Then he did something Kakashi would never expect him to do. He groped Enko's boobs. Initiate bodily harm. In the span of a second, Naruto's body suddenly became filled with kunai. He had a look of glee and amused surprise on his face before he exploded into a puff of smoke. Anko had a disappointed look on her face, absently licking a kunai she had impaled the clone with. Ah, pooh. I wanted to have some more fun. You seem to have become a lot more affectionate since you found out I might not always die from your advances, huh, Anko-heim? Anko frowned. It's just my way of showing my love, Naru-chan. Heh, as you wish. Kakashi turned around to see Naruto clad in his normal apparel, a thin pair of glasses resting on his nose. What looked like a mechanical fox was strewn across his shoulders, and he was holding a mug of coffee in his right hand, an open notebook in his other. Yo, Kakashi-sensei, he said, taking a sip. What are you doing here? Kakashi blinked. A clone. That entire time he was talking to a clone. He knew Kage Bunshin was an amazing technique, and even he used it from time to time, but he had never kept a single clone active long enough to see how close it was to the original personality. But Naruto, he grinned internally at the possibilities. Heh, he was going to have more fun with this team than he initially thought. Staying in his you-smile mode, Kakashi addressed Naruto. So, are you the real one, or am I just wasting my time again? You'll just have to find that out yourself. I suppose I could just stab you, but I don't think Hokage-sama would be very pleased with that course of action. Gigi would forgive ya. Lord knows he's considered it more than once. You're late, you know. Really? Naruto pushed up his sleeve and looked at something on his wrist. I could have sworn I had another 10 minutes or so before you showed up with your customary tardiness. Guess that's my bad then, huh? That's fine, consider it a warning for now. But if you ever show up even later than me again, I'll double your physical training for the next month. Ooh. Ooh. Can you make me run with a boulder tied to my back? I've always wanted to try that before. Kakashi stopped himself from palming his face. Good lord, was the kid distantly related to Guy in some way? He really didn't want to know. And speaking about not wanting to know. I probably shouldn't be asking this, but did you know you have a thunderstorm that seems to be attracted to your apartment building? Oh, that? It's an experimental controller for localized weather patterns. Which wait, did you say it actually worked? Naruto phased out of existence, and the only warnings Kakashi had was the slight pop associated with air being pulled into a vacuum in space, the coffee cup, notebook, and Metaru crashing to the ground, and the slamming of wood against metal. Looking behind him, he saw Naruto stick his head out the window, whooping and hollering up a storm. Yes. I knew I could do it. They laughed when I said I could control the very forces of nature. Well, who's laughing now, Plato? Who's laughing now, Einstein? Who's laughing now, Goodall? Me, that's who. Bwahahaha. I'm the one that's laughing. Bwahahaha dash. He was silenced when the window was bathed in a ring of light and thunder crashed its way through the building. Naruto slowly pulled his head back in, his face a charcoal mess, his glasses shattered, and his hair smoldering slightly. Coughing out a plume of smoke, he frowned sadly. Aw, I was going for typhoon, not squall. Looks like it's back to the drawing board for me. Kakashi couldn't believe it. The boy had been struck by lightning and he was disappointed because it wasn't the natural disaster he wanted. That clinched it, the boy was certifiably insane. Kakashi couldn't wait to see what crap the blonde thought up next. Huh, I didn't know you wore glasses though. They weren't in your medical files. Oh, these? Naruto shrugged and tosses the shattered frames into a random trash can. They're just plain glass. But they make me look I have smarts in my brain goo, don't they? Right, just par for the course. Kakashi shook his head and smiled again. Right. Well, we have to get back to the others. We're late enough as it is. Naruto nodded. He waved goodbye to Anko as he climbed onto the open windowsill. See ya, Anko-heim. Try not to destroy too much of my labs while I'm gone. I promise nothing. Good enough for me. Come on, sensei. Let's go. He then proceeded to not jump but fall out the window, head first. Kakashi's mind suddenly filled with fear. Shit. With a leap, he followed after the plummeting Uzumaki. Anko watched lazily as Metaru climbed into her lap, begging for a good petting. She acquiesced easily enough, barking out orders all the while. "Yo, Metal Boya!" A Narukoan popped out of nowhere. "What is it you desire, mistress?" "Sake and dango. And it better be here in the next 5 minutes or I'll shove ya into the building's electrical circuits." "As you wish, mistress." Anko laid back as the clank frantically fulfilled her wishes. Servants at her beck and call, and a cute, luscious playtui to answer her every carnal need. Now all she had to do was dispose of that ramen girl and she would have Naru-chan all to herself. Bitch was hella dangerous with that ladle of hers though. Regardless, she would defeat her and take the boy toy all for herself. Her wicked laughter filled the room. Naruto smiled as he heard deranged mirth echoing from above him. It looked like Anko was having a good time already. He would have to do a full debugging on his Narukans after her visit. Somehow their programming always seemed to go a little wonky whenever she came over. The air whooshed by him as he continued to fall. It'd probably be best if he did something soon, lest he have an impromptu meeting with the not so far below ground. Swiping a hand over his leg, Naruto gave a quick command. "Kinton, Yukabita." Runes flashed wildly as the board materialized with a burst of chakra, Naruto's feet cementing themselves to its upper side. Tilting the nose up, jets of wind chakra erupted from below, changing his angle and velocity so suddenly that the ground and sky switched places and Naruto found himself rocketing into the sky. "Hi, Kakashi-sensei." He greeted cheerily at the shocked Jounin. With another flare of chakra, the Yukabita picked up speed, and Naruto zoomed down the streets, deftly slaloming between startled civilians, and occasionally riding the walls of building to avoid traffic completely. Kakashi followed at a quick clip. The Jinchuriki never ceased to amaze him. Whatever it was he was riding was going extremely fast. He himself wasn't going as fast as he could, but he definitely had to use chakra to amplify his leg muscles to keep up. When he finally came side by side with Naruto, he let out a cheeky grin. "And what might you call this invention?" Naruto gave a harsh bark as did a flip over a rather tubby merchant. "Yukabita, for when you want to travel in style. And what about your relationship with Anko?" "That, my dear sensei." Naruto winked and put a finger to his mouth in a lazy drawl. "Is a secret." With that, Naruto sped up even more, quickly moving out of Kakashi's sight. The Jounin shook his head. He just knew that things would only get even wilder from this point on. He grinned. It was the kind of grin he hadn't used since his ANBU days. A grin that spelled trouble and suffering for all that came in contact with him. Oh yes, he just couldn't wait. My worthy archenemy. So we finally meet again. It has been many a day since we saw each other last. Oh, I see you're giving me the silent treatment again. As expected of the one who acts as the only barrier between me and my goals. Very well. Now, we must kung fu fight. Is he claiming a rivalry with a cat? He's so frickin' retarded. Sakura and Sasuke looked on in dumb fascination as Naruto settled into a taijutsu stance in front of the striped cat. What the hell was wrong with the kid? And why was the cat staring back at him with clear intent to follow through on the challenge? Kakashi was doing his best to force back the laughter that was battering at his mouth to escape while keeping his balance on the tree branch. This was better than he could ever hope for. Naruto facing off against a cat, and the cat readying itself in turn. No one could come up with this stuff. Team 7 had just received their D-rank mission for the day. Unfortunately, it was to recapture the Fire Daimyo's wife's cat, Tora, who had escaped yet again for the umpteenth time. Catching Tora was considered a rite of passage for all aspiring shinobi. As the cat, and it looks like a cat the same way a katana looks like a butter knife, was unanimously considered more ferocious, ornery, and deadly than most A-class ninjas. If you could catch the cat without gaining some sort of injury, you would be ready for anything. Kakashi wondered how old the damn thing was, as even he had to capture Tora in his own genin days. Though, he had heard rumors in recent months that the Konoha Council was considering upgrading the Tora mission to B rank. How or why, he did not know. What he did not expect was Naruto's reaction to the job description. As soon as Tora's name passed the Sandame's lips, the boy's eyes had flared up wildly, his lips curled into a feral grin, and he started to spout nonsense about how it was fate and the like that had brought the two eternal enemies together again. He hadn't stopped babbling about all his battles and exploits with the feline the entire time the cell had tracked Tora down. By this point in time, his other two teammates had become increasingly frightened and disturbed by his demeanor. Kakashi just thought it was funny as hell. All great ninja had one or two quirks. Naruto was just getting a step up on the crazyometer. Kakashi focused his attention back on the fight at hand. Neither Naruto nor Tora had moved from their spots, though Tora had taken a definite aggressive stance by raising his haunches and flattening his ears. It was a scene that would fit in a samurai epic. Okay, not really. The wind blew. A leaf fell down between the two. They disappeared. That's when trees started turning into scrap paper. Kakashi blinked. Ha! How interesting. Sakura had no idea what to think at the time. She was supposed to catch a stupid cat, but her insane teammate ruined their carefully coordinated ambush by simply dashing out and issuing a duel. Luckily for her, the cat did not immediately run away, instead choosing to watch Naruto with a careful eye. They had only been teammates for a couple weeks, and already Sakura was wishing for the boy's messy and horribly painful demise. Not only did he cause all of their missions to end in complete and utter chaos, but he was cutting into her time with her beloved Sasuke-kun. Sasuke was constantly questioning the inventor about those techniques of his, resulting in him ignoring her even more than usual. And Naruto wouldn't even be a good kid and tell Sasuke all that he wanted. Sasuke spent his regal time with the unworthy boy, and Naruto didn't even appreciate it. How rude. As soon as this mission was over, she was going to smack some good old common sense into the blonde. There was no doubt in her mind that he needed it, and as long as Naruto wasn't asleep or in the middle of a mission or training, there was no danger involved. He took all his lumps with the greatest nonchalance, leading Sakura to speculate on exactly how the mad nin's brain worked. Had she known how perilous Naruto's experiments usually were, she would have realized that a few bruises and cuts was nothing compared to blowing off an appendage or gaining a new orifice. As long as Naruto retained more than 66% use of all his limbs, he considered the damage minimal. So, what was she supposed to do now? If anyone else moved, the cat would be spooked off and run, and where the hell did Naruto and Tora go off to? A sharp breeze whisked above her and a few leaves, thin sheets of bark, and strands of hair flitted into her vision. Pink strands of hair. Reaching above her, she felt at the top of her head. Okay, she wasn't going to go bald, that was good, bald was bad, so what had dash? A low, hollow groaning noise filled the forest, and Sakura absently watched as the tree she was hiding behind slipped neatly off its trunk and fell to the ground with a resounding crash. The cut was smooth and tidy, like the wood had been made out of butter. And as far as she could tell, the same thing was happening to many of the trees surrounding her. Sakura/EXE has performed an illegal function and must now shut down. Press any key to continue. Sakura giggled vapidly and passed out. Idiot. Moron. Fool. Imbecile. Retard. Cretin. Bonehead. HNN. What was another word for a dull-witted dunce who couldn't follow a single order if his life depended on it? Oh wait, that was a good one. Dull-witted dunce. Suffice to say, Sasuke was not entirely pleased with the situation he was currently placed in. While he also could not stand demissions, as they gave no information or training in his quest to kill Itachi and restore his clan's honor and prestige, as an Uchiha, he still had to complete the assignment given to him in as quick and efficient a manner as possible. Besides, the sooner it was over, the sooner he could get to more meaningful training. But that dope screwed up every mission Team 7 had taken thus far. Sure, they had completed each one, but not without massive collateral damage in either the sense of property destruction or mental trauma. Sasuke sneered to suppress the chill creeping through his bones at the thought of the last mission. He didn't know the human body could bend that way, or that it was so inherently flammable. Naruto had to be hiding a lot behind that haphazardly loose smile of his. How else could he bring out device after device that performed so many destructive actions? There wasn't much variety among them, as every single one exploded at one point or another, but still, just the intensity of the explosions made it simple to figure out that those machines carried a great deal of force within them. How such power belonged to one of the stupidest members of the human race Sasuke would never know. There was also the fact that Naruto himself was weak. Every time Naruto had a bout with either him or Sakura, Naruto would be soundly defeated. Except for his monstrous stamina, everything else physical about him was subpar: speed, strength, reaction time, flexibility, everything. The blonde was weaker than most girls his age. His taijutsu style was a joke, a mockery of the academies. There was nothing that could distinguish him as a ninja, nothing. The only thing promising about him were those blasted Kinzoku jutsu of his. Sasuke had to have that power to kill Itachi. He had to. But Naruto just wouldn't give it to him. Arg. It was so infuriating. And now this fight with the mission's target? What was the dope thinking? How could he? Sasuke's thought process swiftly changed as the forest was mowed down, as though by dozens of invisible lumberjacks. Eyes widening, he looked around as gashes mysteriously carved themselves into the bark of the trees with no distinct origin. Both Naruto and the target had disappeared, and he couldn't sense either of them at all. Could they be the reason for this sudden tree-felling event? Sasuke examined one of the gashes on the trees. 4 parallel slashes, each about a couple inches deep and a few centimeters apart, were randomly sliced across the bark. If Sasuke didn't know better, he'd say they looked like they were caused by some kind of animal. But the only known animal in the vicinity was the target, and he highly doubted that a house cat could cause such damage, vicious as it may be. So what exactly? Ah, Tora. It seems that you have become stronger since the last time we met. I applaud you for that, but I'm afraid that this battle must now come to an end. Sasuke turned and saw that Naruto and the target had reappeared, both standing in the exact position that they had started. Naruto had thrust one arm out in a daring accusation, and Tora was staring back intently while licking a paw. Not even you can win against this Justu. And so I look, a huge bowl of milk and catnip. Tora snapped his head in the direction Naruto was pointing, and Sasuke could have sworn he saw the cat wince at its own gullibility when it became obvious there was nothing there. Kinton, Inazuma Ami. Naruto chucked a small capsule at the cat. A large, finely woven net burst forth, swiftly expanding to encompass the feline. Tora struggled, clawing at the net to escape, but it was to no avail. Naruto grinned. Ha! You can't escape that net. It's made up of a metal alloy that not even your titanium claws can rip through. But just in case. Naruto snapped his fingers. Tora lit up like a neon Christmas tree as several thousand volts of electricity coursed through him from the net. Then he exploded. The forest was quiet, each inhabitant watching in dull bafflement as the cat slowly smoldered. Naruto was the first to react, jumping forth and grabbing the cat, holding him in his arms as one would with a small child. Tears streamed down his face as he sobbed loudly for all to hear. No. What have I done? It wasn't supposed to end this way. Tora. Toraea. Yes, Naruto Dobe was truly the stupidest person in existence. Sarutobi rifled through the papers on his desk, checking on the mission reports for the new rookie teams that had just graduated. His eyes fell onto one, and he sighed in bitter amusement as the same name, written in bold, red letters, popped up again and again with details on its owner's escapades. Blew up a water main while digging for sweet potatoes. Set fire to a field to rid it of all weeds and vermin. Gave children access to low-yield explosives to play hot potato with. Bore a hole through 2 houses and 1 fruit cart with a high-pressure hose modified for painting. Sarutobi chuckled as word of the old and new terror that held a tyrannical grip on Konoha rose steadily to the surface of the village's citizens. Naruto was certainly making an impression on everyone, one that was different from his original moniker of Demon Child and Fox Brat. However, that didn't necessarily mean the new nicknames for him were any better. Mad Inventor. Explosive Devil. Chaos Nin. Sarutobi picked up his pipe and took a long, lazy breath of tobacco. Puffing out a ring of smoke, he clenched the pipe between his teeth and swiveled around in his chair to face out the window from his office. From his position in the Hokage Tower, he could see over all of Konoha, the Hyuga compound, the Merchant's Market, the Ninja Academy, the mushroom cloud that was once Training Ground 34. He blinked and leaned forward, squinting his eyes to see better. Yes, he could just barely out the scorched earth and the humongous crater as well as several trees that had been stripped clean from the force of the explosion. Pausing for a second, Sarutobi turned back in his chair and started back on the paperwork, waiting for the inevitable call of the council to do something about the blonde Jinchuriki. He had a few things to discuss with them as well about the boy he considered his own grandchild. He smiled. Perhaps Naruto's involvement in ANBU should be brought to light. Far below the Hokage Tower, a one-eyed, one-armed, one-legged, scratch that last part, man sneezed. Why did it feel like someone had just walked over his grave? Piles of metal, electronics, and various scrap parts rose up like hastily slapped together monoliths. The buzz of chakra and electricity was palpable in the air, charging the surroundings like one huge thunderstorm, waiting to unleash its energy on whoever dared to enter its domain. The junkyard was an odd sector of Konoha. No one knew how it came to be, or even when it appeared, but it was a fragment of the hidden village that had existed since even before Hiroshima Senju razed the trees that made up Konoha. People only knew that the junkyard was a veritable hotspot of natural chakra emanations, one of many that were scattered all over the elemental countries. Most hidden villages had a junkyard, and each one was the same as this one. For some odd reason, all forms of modern technology were originally discovered in the junkyard. Televisions, refrigerators, radios, and anything that could be considered technologically advanced and required electricity were excavated from these sites. It was as if the machines simply popped into existence, because no matter how much collectors took, there were always more the next day or even as soon as they turned around. The general consensus was that, due to the high concentration of chakra, the junkyard acted as a stationary summoning device, reaching into an alternative dimension to bring the machines into the elemental countries. Even decades after people searched through and became familiar with the junkyard and its contents, there was still so much left unknown about technology. Very few people put in effort to understand more about it, and as a result, technology was viewed as little more than a replaceable resource. If a machine broke, it would simply be thrown back into the junkyard and another would be found to replace it. A wizened man with a thin head of hair and pudgy stature sighed as he fiddled with a washing machine, his oil-stained fingers aching with arthritis. The caretaker of the junkyard was viewed as just as much an oddity as the place he looked after. Only known as Gizmo, he had been there for so long, people forgot what his origin or even his age was. Even Sarutobi could remember the man shuffling around the piles of mechanical devices when he was just a child. Gizmo was a strange man, utterly involved in deciphering the mysteries of the junkyard and its machines. He felt that technology could truly benefit mankind, and that they had to have a significant involvement with the world if they were found in so many places other than Konoha. It was too bad that no one else attempted to understand as well. He would be so happy if other people would join him in his quest. Gizmo was sure that by doing so, humanity would reach a new step in evolution. Engineering was like a dance. It took a steady hand and a lot of finesse to properly work with machines. Each part was a beat, each connection a melody, and each result a step. You had to listen and feel rather than just look, and it was something that not everybody could learn to do perfectly. It was a slow process, and not many had the patience or the drive for it. A smile crept onto his face as he plugged a hose into the appropriate inlet valve. Well, there was at least one person who held the same passion for machines as he did. Gizmo wondered when the boy would next visit. "Yo, Gizmo Shursho. Got a request for ya." Ah, there he was. Gizmo turned as the door to his workspace slammed open, a grinning blonde entering and giving a sharp salute. The boy was dressed in his usual attire, but had an additional attachment in the form of a large, striped cat perched on his head and purring peacefully. Naruto's grin grew even larger as he set eyes on the much older man. Gizmo had taught him almost everything he knew about machines. It seemed like it was just yesterday when he had been caught trying to pilfer some random parts from the junkyard. But instead of a fierce scolding like he expected or perhaps even a beating, Gizmo had almost immediately begun to drill him on the generalities and finer aspects of mechanics, both surprising and pleasing the future inventor beyond words. Gizmo was one of the few people Naruto could swear with all honesty he would do anything for. Gizmo actually cashed in on this reward quite often, but luckily it was almost always to have Naruto help him with some new device or perhaps to upgrade an already existing one, something he was all too happy to help with. Gizmo nodded and stood up slowly, his bones creaking in protest. "What can I do for ya, youngin? I need some extra supplies this week. I have to readjust all of Tora's implants after I fried them the other day." The aforementioned cat yowled in agreement, biting the blonde on his head. Tora knew he was much stronger than the average cat thanks to the adjustments Naruto had made on his body, but having to go through upkeep so soon, he wouldn't allow the boy to forget his wrongdoings so easily. Naruto laughed as titanium-coated teeth scratched against his skull. Hee, that tickled. He still remembered the day he saved Tora from being a crippled kitty from one too many killer hugs. The first bionic cat, great in theory, but it required a lot of maintenance. "I need the processor from an X137D2, a 50-volt capacitor, several servos, and a buttload of rebar." Think you have any of that in stock? Gizmo pursed his lips in thought as he walked towards his specially cared-for inventory list. "The last few were easy, but I'm not so sure 'bout the processor. Konoha ain't received many computers lately, at least none that ain't add Thursday components crashed upon entry." He flipped through the pages. "I do have an X135, but I don't know if it'll work for ya." Naruto frowned as he tapped his foot on the linoleum floor. An older processor wouldn't be as precise, but he knew the X135 was considered much faster than its descendants. For the moment, he just had to use something to make sure all of Tora's implants would be in working order again, so as long as the cat didn't attempt to take on a samurai army, he was pretty sure it would fill the requirements. He nodded. "I can probably throw some other components together to make up for the discrepancies, so I'll take it." "Thanks." Gizmo nodded. "I'll put it on your tab." "Thanks." Naruto pointed at the washer. "Job?" "No, it's actually a new version. Think it came over in the last couple days. Wanted to see if it had any new parts one could use." "Ah, that's cool." Gizmo let out a fond smile as Naruto inched over to the machine and stuck his head into it, his feet dangling over the edge as he balanced on the opening. Tora had decided to sharpen his claws on a 2-inch thick slab of sheet metal, his enhanced nails making quick work of the impromptu scratching post. Gizmo considered the boy as his own grandson, if he had ever had children in the first place. Who cared if the boy was a Jinchuriki? As familiar with machines as he was, Gizmo knew that software and hardware were two completely different elements. Confusing one for the other was a rookie mistake, and a dumb one at that. Besides, comparing Naruto to the Kyuubi was like comparing a monsoon to another, well, a more compact force of destruction. But at least the boy was likable. Bright-eyed, enthusiastic, inquisitive, these were the makings of a great inventor and engineer. He just couldn't wait to see how Naruto would turn out. Speaking of which, how's the ninja business goin', youngin'? You kill your team yet? Nah, they're still alive, Naruto called from inside the washer, his voice taking on a muffled echo effect. Surprising really, they seem a bit soft for the ninja business. Did you know they've never seen a 2-story house collapse when all of its support beams have been taken out with pinpoint charges of C4? You removed the filter for your brain, didn't ya? But it's so much more fun when I don't think or care about the likely consequences of my actions. How can I take over the world when I think about all the people I'm likely to squash or blow up? You're a real piece of work, youngin'. I'm proud to know that someone I trained will become a vicious overlord. I thank you for the compliment. When the world is mine, you will be spared from the coal mines and shall receive a lovely gift basket in gratitude. Gizmo chuckled at Naruto's promise, and it grew to a full-blown laugh when the blonde fell straight into the washer, his surprised cry giving way to glee. "Hey! A 500 Ryo coin! Score!" Shaking his head, Gizmo grabbed the back of Naruto's coat and pulled. Naruto flew backwards with a resounding pop and slammed into the ground. Naruto picked himself up and gave his head a shake. Gizmo rolled his eyes. "And your jutsu? How they cumin long?" If possible, Naruto's smile increased in size. The corners of his lips strained terribly at his joy. "Great! Now that I can do Kage Bunshin, I have so much more time on my hands to create weapons of mass destruction. It's awesome." The elder snorted. "Kage Bunshin, what's that, some new invention of yours?" Naruto's grin became malicious in nature. Plugging his fingers into the reverse ram seal, he called out the Jounin level technique. The room filled with smoke, slowly filtering away to reveal a dozen more of the boy. Gizmo blinked. Reaching a hand forward, he patted one of the clones on the chest. It puffed out, a prideful expression written across its features. "So, what do you think?" With a deadpan look on his face, Gizmo pointed at the door. "All of ya, out. You're organizing the entire junkyard." The group of Narutos let out a synchronized, aw. Building things was fun, but they didn't want to clean up more stuff, especially stuff they didn't mess up in the first place. Original Kin go. Others stay her. Who? See ya suckers. Gizmo watched as Naruto clicked his heels together while the clones grumbled darkly. He pointed out to the junkyard storage building. "The processors located in Bunker A2. You know where the others are." He turned back to the washer. You wanna come back to help me with this, or are you too busy later? Sorry, I've got some jobs of my own I've gotta do. Maybe tomorrow, but for now, I gotta go. Naruto gave another crisp salute, scooped Tora up in one arm, and walked halfway out the door. See ya, Gizmo Shursho. The door slammed again behind him. Gizmo looked at the clones. Well? What are you waiting, fair? Get out Thursday. I want the junkyard spotless. They each raised a hand in compliance. Roger, Shursho. With that, they quickly fled from the room, off to places and bodily injuries unknown. Gizmo sighed in bemusement before focusing his attention back on the washer. Now, on Taya, me putty. Tools burst from his hands, glittering in excitement and anticipation. Not a second to waste. The waltz had begun. Parts went flying everywhere. Whistling filled the air amongst the rows of flowers, ferns, and other plants. A blond man in his late 20s moved amongst them with a grace uncommon for a man of his size and build. The Yamanaka patriarch carefully watered his shop's goods, meticulously checking each one to make sure they had received their designated amount. There was no greater joy for Inoichi than to take care of his shop. Being a ninja was definitely exciting and kept his blood pumping and him always on his toes, but when there was a need to unwind, there was no better option than to tend to the veritable garden he owned. Perhaps it was Konoha's own sense of irony, but his flower shop was the most visited and well-liked in the hidden village. Being of a ninja clan that dealt with mind techniques, most of his family paid the bills by either performing full-time in the interrogation department, or as part-time psychologists or psychiatrists. But while Inoichi did do some jobs for Ibiki from time to time, he much more preferred taking the more passive side career of botanist/florist. He couldn't really explain it, but perhaps it was because of his intimate connection to the human mind that people loved his flowers so much more than others. There were studies about plants reacting positively to positive attitudes and the tendency to try and bond with them. If he could understand the intricacies of the human psyche, he could easily understand the feelings of plants. Through that, he could make them bloom even more beautifully than anyone else. It was something that he took pride in, and something that he doubted he would ever come to loathe. Now that sounds like tempting fate. Well, ask and ye shall receive. Turning around, Inoichi almost dropped the potted flowers he was holding when he came face to inverted face with Naruto. The younger blonde was dangling upside down, his feet hooked onto a hanging planter. The boy raised, lowered, a hand in greeting. Yo! Inoichi grumbled, an eye twitching in annoyance, as he placed the pot carefully on the floor. He never got how a boy that was barely into puberty could be so good as hiding his presence, especially since he always wore such garish clothing. Then again, Naruto had been running from villagers, both civilian and ninja, as well as the elite ANBU for the better half of a decade. If he could do that, then Inoichi supposed it would be easy for him to hide when Inoichi's guard was down while he was surrounded by his plants. Naruto, get down from there before you hurt yourself. Naruto flipped to the ground, putting his arms out perpendicular to his body. He gave a deep bow. Ta-da! The planter, jostled from his movements, unhooked itself from the ceiling and crashed onto his head. The holder had a nice even crack down the middle, each half falling to the side while the soil rubbed itself into Naruto's hair. He grimaced. Ouch! Oh, you poor thing! Inoichi rushed forward. Are you hurt? Here, let me make it all better. He scooped up the flowers planted on Naruto's head and transferred them to a new planter, lovingly covering the roots with dirt and placing them off to side. He threw a disinterested look over his shoulder. Go clean yourself up, Naruto. You look a mess. Naruto puffed out his cheeks as he brushed the dirt out of his hair. You're so cruel, Inoichi-kun. How could you act this way toward such a good friend? Maybe it's because the last time we saw each other, you almost destroyed my greenhouse with those modifications you made to my sprinkler. How much pressure did you add to it? Naruto grinned sheepishly. Hee, oops. But I warned you to use the lowest setting. It's not my fault you turned it up to maximum on the initial usage. Maybe because I didn't expect it to blast me out a wall. For heaven's sake, you used a Suryuden as the base for it. Aesthetic purposes. How cool is it to have dragons watering your plants? Naruto, you should thank whatever god you pray to that I need you for maintenance on all the more complicated devices for my shop. Otherwise I'd mind rape your ass till you were nothing more than a drooling vegetable. I doubt Ji-san would let you do that. I'd like to see him try and stop me. Ah, that's what I love about ya, Inoichi-kun, your threats of mental decapitation are always so pleasant to listen to. Inoichi blinked, paused for a moment, and then shook his head in resignation. Really, he just couldn't win against this kid. Jinchuriki or not, he was a force not to be taken lightly. He was certainly crazy, but also certainly quite a jokester and honestly enjoyable to be around. Shrugging his shoulders, a light smile crossed his face. Well, what are you here for today? Want to buy some more flowers for your garden? Nah, it's good. Besides, I think Lily and the others would get jealous if I brought even more competition into the fray. They're bad enough with what I have already. How are they, by the way? Last time I saw them, they were still pretty small but growing strong. Naruto laughed heartily. They're fine. Too fine in fact. They're so damn energetic and are always wanting out of the lab. Can you imagine the panic that would result if they were wandering the streets? Inoichi had a sudden image of the mentioned girls walking through Konoha. To be honest, he wasn't sure if they would be feared or revered thanks to their nature, but it would definitely cause a stir. To him, they were a gardener's ultimate dream, and Naruto had been the one to bring the dream to life. Just for that, he would be a lifelong friend of the inventor. Chuckling at the thought, he returned his attention back to the present. So, if not that, then what are you here for? His eyes narrowed in suspicion. You're not going to try and upgrade my tools again, are you? Naruto took a step back at the killing intent leaking out from the older man. His eye twitched for a second, and his grin turned anxious. No, nothing like that. Just thought you'd like to know that it is ready. It? What the hell are you? Inoichi's eyes widened. Wait, you don't mean... Naruto's smile became confident again. Da. He crowed, whisking out a small vial. Inside was a green liquid with the consistency of honey. He waved it tauntingly in the air, taking note how Inoichi's eyes followed its every movement. The ultimate potion for the ultimate gardener, Garden Quick Grow. I can't believe you actually finished it. Naruto shook his head. It took me a long time to figure out the right formula and ratios for it, but I finally got it working. Taken straight from the ultimate plants, my beauties back at home, this'll make sure any plant grows into a thriving jungle. Careful though, it's really potent. Ionikai subtly wiped the drool forming at the corner of his mouth and straightened up. How potent? 1 milliliter to 50 liters of water. Inoichi scoffed. It can't be that potent. Nothing has to be diffused that much. Something changed in Naruto's eyes. They began to glitter dangerous. Oh, really? Shall we test it out then? He took a look around the greenhouse, his eyes falling onto a rather sickly-looking plant. Most of its leaves had fallen off, its stem and roots were dry and shriveled, and it was hunched over so badly more of it was on the ground than off it. How about this one then? Inoichi frowned when he looked at it. He knew that fern. No matter how much care he lavished on it, it just didn't want to grow. Water, sunlight, fertilizer, everything seemed to make it worse instead of better. By this point, he wrote it off as an impossible cause. Sure, go ahead. But I doubt it'll work. Nothing else has so far. Naruto grinned and fished an eyedropper from one of his duster's many pockets. Popping the lid on the vial, he drew a minuscule amount of the liquid and then deposited it on the plant. It was quickly absorbed and, for a brief moment, the plant glowed a pale green. Seconds went by, and then minutes, but nothing happened. Inoichi rolled his eyes. See? Nothing. He was interrupted when a rumbling shook his feet. Looking down, he saw that the pot was vibrating wildly, shaking on the table like a mad jackrabbit. With a sudden crack, the pot exploded, large, thick roots crawling away. The plant regained its color and more as it grew to gargantuan size, leaves and flowers sprouting every which way, the stem reaching up to the ceiling. In mere seconds, the plant that had been on the verge of death was now thriving with energy and life. Inoichi's jaw slipped open. He just couldn't, this was... Naruto, this is unbelievable. Do you know what this means? Horticulture is going to have its history rewritten because of this discovery. Naruto nodded rapidly. I know. Isn't it great? But, there are a few things I have to warn you about. Anything. Don't use too much of this stuff. That means in one dosage or over continuous usage. It has some, Bad side effects on the plant's physiology. Inoichi turned his head when he heard his daughter calling for him from inside the store. Daddy! There's some customers waiting for you. Could you come greet them? In a minute, princess. Inoichi looked back at Naruto. What kind of side effects? He froze. Well, the plant's need for nitrogen grows at an exponential rate, and since the soil can no longer meet those needs, it adapts so it can receive nitrogen from other sources. The plant had grown even larger and created some new appendages that weren't there before. Leaf blades that resembled those on a Venus flytrap grew out from the sides, large enough to fit a baby cow in. They opened up, drool falling from their mouths. A low growl filled the air as they slowly snapped open and shut. Feed me. Inoichi could not do a thing as they descended on him. Daddy? What's taking you so long? Ino popped her head into the greenhouse. Her eyes widened in shock. Daddy? Inoichi was suspended in the air, half swallowed by one of the plant's leaf blades. He was struggling, but the trap was clamped down tightly on him, and he could already feel the plant's enzymes dissolving his hair. Naruto was nowhere to be found. Daddy! Ino cried, stomping her feet on the ground. Stop playing with the merchandise. We have customers to help. Inoichi swore he was going to kill that child the next time he saw him. A dense glob of drool slapped onto his cheek. You! 3 ash-colored hounds followed a pretty girl in her late teens, red clan markings on both her cheeks. There was nary a cloud in the sky, the birds were singing, the wind gently blowing by. Today was such a beautiful and perfect day. Hanata-in. Never mind. The Inuzuka heiress looked towards who was calling her name, the Haimaru Sankyodai following their master's gaze. There, running towards them, was Naruto, though he was moving rather slowly. Scratch that, he was literally moving in slow motion, his legs pumping sluggishly and his arm waving at the same pace. A brainless grin was on the boy's face as he called out for the older girl. Hana let out a feral grin. Stupid boy, even stupider if he thought she forgot what he did last time. Nodding towards the only male of the Inunin, she ordered him, Masato, sick him. Giving a slight growl in ascension, the dog launched forward, quickly shortening the distance between him and Naruto and tackling him to the ground. He latched his fangs around the boy's neck, taking care to not pierce his flesh, but rather to clamp onto the thick fabric of his jacket. He growled in greeting. Naruto patted the dog's head. Hey, Masato. How you doin', boy? His face became sunny when Hana walked up to him with her other Inunin, Riko and Mihato. Hana-tan. I missed you. You're really pushing it, aren't you, brat? The girl growled. Didn't I say the last time we met that I would sign my name into your hide? I'd gladly accept your gifts of love, Hana-tan. All you have to do is ask. Then please, just die. As you wish. Hana's eyes bugged out when Naruto lurched forward, his throat ripping itself on Masato's fangs. Blood spurted everywhere before Naruto's head lolled back and rolled off his body completely. His lifeless eyes stared back at her before it and his body exploded, confetti falling everywhere from the blast. Hana and her Inunin stood in shock as streamers and other minute party favors gathered on them. That was awesome. Hana reacted on instinct, spinning on her heels and lobbing a fist in a vicious right hook. She caught Naruto right in the face, propelling him backwards and into the alley's wall. He sat up from the blow wobbly, his eyes spinning in a comical manner. Whoa, spinny, can't you take a joke, Hana-tan? The girl frowned. You have a twisted sense of humor. I prefer laughing outside the box. Hana sighed and walked over to the boy. Putting a hand against his cheek where a large bruise had begun to form, perfectly shaped like her fist, her hand began to glow green. You are such an idiot, Naruto-kun. She watched in amazement as the bruise almost instantly faded away. His regenerative powers thanks to the fox were no laughing matter. Even with the medical jutsu she was using, it required at least a minute or so for an injury of that size to heal. Naruto laughed sheepishly. Hana just didn't get the boy. Smelled like a fox, acted like a fox, heck, he even looked like a fox, but when it came down to it, he was even more fiercely loyal than an Inuzuka. Kyubi or not, she felt a faint attraction to the boy. It was mixed with a healthy dose of bloodlust, but she supposed that was natural considering his attitude. She sighed in frustration. Why'd she have to be friends with a scrawny idiot who was more unpredictable than her own little brother? So, what are you here for, besides giving me a heart attack? Naruto grinned and stood up. Nothin'. Just thought I'd thank ya for helping me with Metaru's personality matrix. The insight you gave me was really, really helpful. Hana nodded. She knew about the pseudofox. Naruto had come to the Inuzuka clan to ask about how dogs acted around their family and friends. Much of the clan had initially turned him away thanks to his correlation to the Kyuubi, but thankfully the clan elder, Tsum, found him to be quite the interesting brat and had assigned Hana to help him do to her job as a veterinarian. It probably helped that Naruto was the personal fix-it man for not only the Inazaka but also most of the other ninja clans in Konoha thanks to his own renowned skills with machines. Of course, having such a close relationship with the village leader helped as well. In any case, you don't mess with the person that keeps the plumbing and electricity for your household running. Besides, the boy himself was a riot to be around. If there was anything that Tsum appreciated, it was a good practical joke now and then, especially when members of her clan, human and canine, became too lax and lazy for her taste. Hooray for pepper bombs in dog bones, indeed. So how's the little guy doing? You should realize he's gonna act more like a dog than a fox. I only gave him that exterior because I like foxes. Dogs are pretty awesome too, plus they're really good partners. Metaru's two awesome things in one. Riko responded with a bark and a tail smack to Naruto's rear, causing him to stumble. Hana smiled. Well, that was another thing she liked about him liking dogs. That little bit never hurt. Well, at least you realize who your betters are. Good boy. She patted Naruto on the head. If he had a tail of his own, he'd have been wagging it at that moment. Yup. And to show my appreciation, here. Gifts. He pulled out 3 bones and a small box, handing them to the appropriate receivers. Hana looked at the box suspiciously. These aren't gonna explode on us, are they? Because if they do, you know what'll happen. Naruto put a hand to his chest. Hana-tan, you wound me deeply. Don't you trust me? He added big, watery eyes for effect. Let me think about it. No. Whatever. See you later, Hana-tan. See ya, doggies. Naruto waved goodbye and ran off, quickly disappearing around a corner. Hana looked carefully at the box. She tapped it, nothing happened. She listened carefully, no muted ticking. She took a slight whiff, nothing there either. Allowing a smile to grace her lips, she shrugged and pulled on the festive bow on the top. The box sprung open, a gray cloud assaulting her face. Her eyes watered and she began to sneeze uncontrollably. Next to her, the Himuru Sankyodai suffered the same fate when the bones cracked open. As Hana stood in the gray mist, a red mist formed in her mind. Pepper, bombs, her pupils contracted, her canines drawing over her lips. Masato, Riko, Mihato, formation Kitsune hunt. Rip him to shreds. The air filled with the angry barks of the hunters and the maniacal laughter of the hunted. Altogether a perfect day. All right. That's enough for now. You've earned your break. Sakura collapsed on her butt, sweating and breathing heavily. Finally. So, tired. Kakashi grinned. What's wrong, Pinky? You seemed a bit bushed. Like you don't know the reason, she mumbled underneath her breath. Kakashi-sensei's such a jerk. Smack him one. The Jounin leaned over, his eye caught in a U-shape. What was that? Sakura immediately recognized the facial expression. The man made it enough times for her to realize that she was in much peril. Nothing. She squeaked. She didn't want to do the babysitting missions. Not again. So much cleaning and changing. Sasuke watched with an impassive eye at the two. Everyone in his cell was worthless. Sakura had no stamina at all and would hardly be of any help, even with all the intense training they had gone through. Kakashi refused to teach them any jutsus, instead focusing on improving their physical limits and chakra control and reserves. How was he supposed to take revenge if he didn't learn any powerful techniques? As the man who killed off nearly his entire clan, Itachi wouldn't be cornered just from some added muscle mass and chakra finesse. Sasuke needed brute force. But the one who pissed him off most of all, the one who truly got underneath his skin, Sasuke chanced a glance at the tree they had been practicing tree walking on for most of the morning. How in the hells did the dobe have such good chakra control already? He made Sakura look even more useless than usual, and she had beaten Sasuke like it was nothing. Curse that dobe. Curse him. Sasuke twitched. Oh gods, now he was even starting to think like the fool. What was next? A horrible fashion sense that involved pigments no shinobi with enough common sense to fill a thimble would have. Gah! Why him? Naruto watched from the boughs of the trees as the Uchiha Scion's features fell into turmoil. Excellent, everything was progressing just as he had seen it. Slowly, but ever so surely, his minions were coming around to his world all too soon. They would realize just who the true genius and master was. And then his dreams would come to fruition. Bwahahahaha. Naruto shook with poorly contained laughter. Yes, all according to plan. A month had passed since his induction into the ranks of Konoha's ninja and his position in Team 7. So far, everything had been coming along smoothly, and his machinations for the future were becoming more clear and certain with every passing day. His exploits amongst Konoha's civilian sector, his careful corruption of his teammates and Jounin-sensei, his ever-growing hold over the ninja clans he acted as mechanic for, everything was a piece of the grand puzzle that would culminate in his eventual takeover of Konoha. From there, it would only be a short time before his influence would infect the rest of the elemental countries, and then, whatever lied beyond them. Naruto leaned back against the tree's trunk, tapping his fingers on his crossed arms. His mind sank into his fantasies, leaving reality behind for a more pleasant version. A beautiful moment, a lifetime of preparation, and the result that would consume the world. Ah, such a wonderful thought. Of course, he couldn't relax yet. There were more events to figure out, more people to affect, and more jutsus he had to create. Becoming ruler of the world was a never-ending job. He couldn't afford such lenient breaks. His thoughts floated over to Sarutobi. He wondered, just how much did the old man know, and how much was he letting escape his ever-vigilant sight? As leader of a hidden village, he couldn't just allow such an obvious threat continue on. Then again, with all the times they met, Naruto assumed that the man either simply didn't care, or secretly found the whole concept amusing and supported it from the sideline. Yet another person who would gain a respectful position at his side once the world was his. And as for his minions' teammates minions was right. Sakura first up. Still a total fangirl for Sasuke. The harsh training had barely acted as a deterrent for her heavy crush, and instead seemed to have the opposite effect. Now she chased after the Uchiha with a renewed and even more zealous fervor. Perhaps because she believed herself to be even more worthy of his affections. This could be a good or a bad thing. If Naruto managed to conquer Sasuke's loyalties, then Sakura would come leaping in. But there was also the chance of Sasuke doing the opposite. A 50-50 chance. Sounded like fun. Her chakra control was amazing, though that should be obvious considering her female gender and small reserves. She was becoming more physically fit, but her mind was still her top resource. He still had to see how she would react in live combat. Though that wouldn't be for a while, or at least till they earned C-rank missions. Sasuke was a whole different matter. Strong, fast, average control and reserves, and even a few fire jutsu, the child was well-rounded. He was most definitely a combat type, and Naruto shivered at the thought of how the boy would rise once his bloodline awoke. Naruto had no problems with Sasuke's capabilities as a ninja. His mind, however, was something else. Obsession could be useful. It created drive, and drive helped one become stronger. But the backlash of that drive could be considerably more harmful than its benefits. However, he could just deal with it when it came to it. And Kakashi? Kakashi was Kakashi. When crazy met crazier, Ibiki looked down at his clipboard. He always loved whenever the Ninja Academy opened again. So many ripe minds, just waiting to be violated in so many vile and cruel ways. It was the only time the interrogations department of Konoha was allowed carte blanche on its children. After all, they had to make sure no one with severe mental defects was being allowed into the academy. Whether they came in or out of the psyche interviews with such defects was totally irrelevant. His gaze scanned through the various names. One in particular caught his attention. One reason was because of the age of the applicant, as he was a year younger than the age requirement, and another was because of who the person was. He checked who it was supposed to be interviewing him. A cruel smile crossed his face. Her, ha. It was a match made in heaven. The Kyubi Jinchuriki and the trader's ex-apprentice. Well, he couldn't allow two people who were obviously meant for each other to be separated for much longer, could he? He called over to the special jounin who was lounging in a chair, picking her nails with a kunai. Mitarashi. You're up. A leer crossed her face. Really? Yay. She hopped up, snatching the sheet Ibiki held out and ran all the way to the designated interview room. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Fresh meat. Slamming the door upon, she strutted in, immediately taking in the appearance of the boy waiting inside. Wild blonde hair, extremely short, his feet were a good foot off the ground while he sat in the chair, messy, oil-stained clothes, and, from his face, very, very young. Enko blatantly licked her lips. The boy started to shake. Excellent. She spun the other chair in the room around and straddled it. So, brat, I'm gonna be your interviewer. Just answer all these questions as honestly as you can, and I'll be sure to make this as painless as possible. At the pause, she leaned forward, exposing her mesh-covered bosom to the boy. He shook even more. She grinned. Name, Naruto Uzumaki. Dreams? She leaned further forward. He said nothing. She frowned. Dreams? Still nothing. Enko's non-existent temper ran out on her and flared. Look, brat, are you gonna answer me, or am I gonna have Ta make ya? To take over the world? She blinked. She must have misheard that. The blonde's head snapped up, his eyes burning with overflowing passion. He jumped up, knocking his chair onto its back. To take over the world. He shouted. To stand at the head of it all, and make everyone bow before my scientific genius. I will rule all that lies before me and beyond, and all shall know of my majesty and prestige. He stomped forward, grabbing Enko's face. For some reason, the urge to stab the boy in his face repeatedly and without remorse at his brazen action drained away. I know of you, Enko Mitarashi. I know of those that betrayed you, of those that ridiculed and despised you because of their own pettiness. I know of your desire to rule over the peons that dare cast you to the side without recognition or respect. I know how you wish to grind them under your feet and claim yourself as Grand Queen of the world. He jerked her towards him so that their faces were barely an inch apart. Join me, Enko Heim. Join me and I'll lay the world at your feet, the power to crush all that oppose you. Rule by my side as gods of this pitiful world. For the first time in years, Enko felt herself swept away by a force greater than her. The word she had kept locked away in her mind for so long came rushing back as those icy blue orbs stared right through her. Master. Once again, her tongue darted over her lips. Ibiki walked over to the interview room. It had been almost a half hour already and he hadn't heard any cries of pain or pleas for mercy originating from Enko's case yet. As he drew closer, raised voices did begin to reach his ears. But they seemed a bit odd. He opened the door, and blinked. Enko was perched on the chair, sitting on her haunches like a cat as she started intensely at the ceiling, ready to pounce. Come down here. I must have you now. Naruto was sticking to a corner of the ceiling, his face crossed and stubborn. No. You only want me for my mind. Yes, give me those delicious brains. I must have thems. Never. Enko leapt up, grabbing the younger boy by his duster and attempting to drag him down. His fingers dug into the ceiling and walls, through solid concrete, shouting out rape and how he didn't mean this. Enko told him to just take it like a man. Ibiki slowly closed the door and turned around. He looked at his clipboard again. Retrieving a pen, he scribbled something on the sheet of paper. No known mental problem or deficiencies. Pass. He nodded and headed back down the hall. The ruckus continued. The 6 million Rio cat. He must save him. Found on the road with multiple crushed organs and fractured bones, obviously from a great, unknown amount of pressure placed upon his small frame. He had to make sure he lived, or else he couldn't live up to his own expectations. He pulled on the latex gloves, snapping them as they fit around his fingers. Each tool was laid out before him, waiting to be used to save this small, forgotten life. Parts were set aside until they could be implanted. The patient was tenderly placed upon the surgical table, a bright light focused on him, various sensors attached to check and regulate his vital signs. He looked at his assistants surrounding the doctor and patient, their glowing eyes waiting for commands and assurances. He nodded. Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology. We have the capability to build the world's first bionic cat. Tora will be that cat. Better than he was before. Better, stronger, faster. Their eyes shimmered with anticipation. He nodded again and took the scalpel. He made the first incision. Chapter 4, Psychos in Love, Teams in Distress. Naruto slowly meandered through the forest. His Roketo Kutsu trampled over fallen leaves and branches, making crunching noises as he glided in a lazy zigzag pattern around various bushes and trees. There was no purpose to his movements as he crossed his own trodden path again and again, he was just spending the day lazing about. Every so often, Kakashi gave Team 7 a day off from their training and missions. He thought it would act as a way to make them more susceptible to his posing as a loving teacher. Technically he was just giving them the minimum number of vacation days Konoha's military laws required for genin so they wouldn't die from exhaustion. Still, his careful planning of when he actually gifted his troops with the free time, timing it just when they were nearing deadly fatigue, was quite masterful. Naruto found it deliciously Machiavellian of the silver-haired Jounin. He wholeheartedly approved of the ploy. Still, the scarcity of days when he had nothing to do was quite high. Thanks to his generous application of the Kage Bunshin, he found that all of the projects that he'd had to put aside due to lack of time and manpower were already ahead of schedule. The Narukons were currently in the process of finishing their own auto-updating system, and Metoru was spending the day over at Hana's so the veterinarian could work on his persona protocols. Enko was in the middle of working at the interrogation department, and most of the other nins he associated with were currently on duty. His own team had left to do whatever they did when they weren't working. Thus, left with an entire day with nothing for him to really do, Naruto decided to take a page out of the Nara's book and just spend the day enjoying whatever the natural wilderness of Konoha's less-used training grounds could afford him. For once, his mind was not devising new ideas for jutsu or mechanical theories, simply floating from random thought to random thought without any real process or destination. To be honest, he found it thrilling how at peace he felt when his mind wasn't running on all cylinders, synapses crackling as electricity raised along his neurons. Oops, he was falling into his inventor persona again. Naruto gave a soft, soulful laugh as he deftly pirouetted around some roots that jutted out of the ground, forming a maze of flowing wood and dirt. It was almost as if the world was falling into perfect synchronization with his motions, dancing to a tune that neither it nor Naruto knew or cared about. A melody quietly escaped from his lips, his humming filling the air with carefree tranquility. Ah, what was there to worry about? Friends, family, the world, it all meant nothing at this moment. Sure, he would have to return to his calling as future conqueror of existence, but he supposed his eventual followers could forgive him for this small indiscretion. His swirling thoughts were broken when the sound of impacting objects and grunts of exertion floated into his ears. Naruto slowed down his skating, perplexed by the origin of the noises. He gave a small, vague shrug. Well, he might as well check it out. Following the sounds, he eventually came across a small clearing in the woods, marked by several training dummies and targets. Kunai, shuriken, and senbon were littered across the place, most of them embedded in the various bulias carefully positioned around the area. However, the scattered throwing weapons were not what caught his eye. No, it was something far more pure, beautiful and deadly. Sleek steel gleamed in the sunlight, curving into a wicked edge and point. It stood on the end of carefully polished and maintained wood, formed into a long and thick pole. Where wood and metal met was a finely woven veil of silk, crimson as blood as it waved back and forth in the gentle morning wind. The guandao swayed to and fro, deflecting the oncoming assaults of shadowed attackers, the veil flowing in a path of destruction. It feinted to the right before dashing forward, slicing through one of the training dummies right where its heart would be. The weapon receded before repeating the action, again and again as it brutally and efficiently ripped the straw effigy of a man to shreds. With one final thrust, the guandao pierced its way through the stomach of the dummy. Calloused hands let go of the weapon, moving to the side and back before a double-headed axe, the head as large as his arm, appeared in a flash of light and a puff of chakra. Where the guandao had been exotic and exquisite in its dexterous handling, the axe was striking and cruel in its brute strength. It rose back before swinging in a horizontal sweep, catching the next dummy in the hip. The blade sunk in only an inch or so in before it was withdrawn. Legs jumped backwards, rappelling off a tree before smoothly bringing the axe in a powerful, overhead chop, bisecting the dummy from head to groin. Sweat trickled down toned muscles as another flash, another weapon came into existence. A huge scythe was brought into the world, its 3-foot blade arced into a delightfully sadistic crescent moon. The hands tightened their hold before the owner's hips twisted and feet dug into the ground, the blade sowing a circle of death amongst the dummies. The scythe was dropped and a storm of kunai erupted from the center, striking the targets everywhere. A second passed. Then 2. Then 3. With a despairing groan, the dummies slid off their bases, each falling perfectly backwards and landing with a muffled crash and clatter. The hands reached up and removed the blindfold, revealing eyes that shined with a light just as sharp and dangerous as the weapons they wielded. Naruto remembered to breathe. He took a gulp of air as he supported himself on a tree, his knees had gone weak. Only one thought revolved his mind as he watched the goddess take a look at her handiwork. She's perfect. His foot slipped forward from underneath him, breaking a twig with an audible snap. He barely had time to realize his mistake before the kunai struck him between his brows. Tenten was in a foul mood, and when she was in a foul mood things tended to get stabbed. A lot. It wasn't like she'd had a particularly bad day. There were no problems at home, her training was progressing smoothly, and she was planning to have a good, long soak when she returned home. It was just that her team drove her crazy sometimes. Team 9 was considered one of the oddest genin teams in Konoha. With a jounin instructor like Mato Guy, it was hard to think of them as anything else. The man was widely known throughout the hidden village for being a training and battle maniac, as well as for his fevered speeches about the flames of youth to all that would pay attention to him. He was a great and effective teacher, and even an acceptable father figure, but the man had no concept of the word shame, and there were times when Tenten could barely restrain herself from launching a full volley of kunai at him, though it would have little effect. The jounin's miniature copy was, perhaps, just as infuriating. Tenten liked Lee. The bowl-cut boy was great to hang around with, and a blast to watch whenever he somehow got his hands on some booze. His chakra defect made Tenten appreciate her own capabilities with sealing scrolls and ninjutsu, and she found his undying passion for becoming the best taijutsu master in the world to be ambitious, if perhaps just a bit selfish. But when he and Guy fell into one of those sensei fits, she usually found herself physically ill at the sight. It was embarrassing for heaven's sake. Niji wasn't much better. Okay, yes, she found the Hyuga prodigy to be insanely hot. And she had a great deal of respect for his goal of overthrowing the tyrannical relationship between the main and branch families of the Hyuga, but his fate speeches truly got on her nerves after a while. She was not like the many fangirls of her year. She found Niji to be very handsome, but it didn't cloud her vision and keep her from realizing that, at times, he could be a bit, okay, a lot, of a winner. Saying losers would be losers and were fated to fall beneath the feet of those above them was rather hypocritical considering Niji's own standing in his family politics. Most of the time, she could deal with them. Yeah, she knew that she couldn't really point much of a finger due to her obsession, hobby, she meant hobby, with weapons, but at least she didn't drag others into her world full of shiny, happy, pointy, sharp bliss. Beautiful, lethal weapons with their alloy compounds and fiery blacksmithing techniques and wonderful katas and conventional compositions and, right. She was beginning to lose herself again. So when things became too much for her, she released the steam that had built up, via wanton destruction. It felt so good to hold the weight of a real weapon in her hands, to shift along the pendulum of restraint and haphazard carnage. Tenten knew she wasn't like the other kunoichi. She preferred swords over dolls and sweating in a workout over pretend tea parties. Her clothes were not stylish or fashionable, consisting only of Chinese-styled pants and vests, but rather focused on functionality and durability. She was a tomboy both at heart and in looks. And the best part, she didn't give a flying rat's ass what anybody thought. She was going to be a famous kunoichi, just like her idol, Tsunade of the Sannin, and no one was gonna tell her otherwise. She swept through the imaginary battlefield like a Valkyrie of yore, her blood crying with the song of battle. Her covered eyes took down one phantom foe after another, her skin tingling with the crisp morning air. When she was done with her mock assault, Tenten removed her blindfold. Looking around, she was impressed with her practice. She had cleanly cut down all of her intended targets, though it looked like she had to work on her arm strength as the last couple of dummies had a ragged gash through them. compared to the clean cuts of the others. Plus, her thrown weapons were slightly off-center. She had to work on negating the loss of equilibrium caused by her spin. Still, her capabilities with melee weapons had grown incredibly. I did good, she grinned, breathing only a little harder than when she started. Something snapped behind her. Adrenaline still coursing through her system, she instinctively grabbed a kunai and shot it at the sound. She was rewarded with the clanging of muted metal and a screech of pain and surprise. Tenten followed the path of her attack and was horrified to find a body laid out on the forest floor. Oh no, did she hit someone? Rushing over, she knelt at the boy's side. Wringing her hands in worry, she searched for where her kunai must have stabbed him. Oh geez, are you hurt? Please don't be dead. Finding the injury, she was relieved to find only a small nick on his forehead and, luckily, it wasn't bleeding. The kunai must have glanced off his skull. Tenten found herself half disappointed with her throw, knowing that it would never ward off an attacker, and half happy that she hadn't murdered some random citizen. She took the time to look at the boy. He was scrawny, with a wild mop of blonde hair, though the whisker markings were kind of cute. Her eyes darted to the Hittite secured around his neck. The blonde must be one of the rookies that just graduated, no way would anyone else be hit by that attack. Strange though, she did think the boy looked familiar. The boy groaned. Opening his eyes, he blearily looked up at her. Tenten sighed. Great, he had already regained consciousness. Though, by the look of his dilated pupils, the boy was probably suffering from a concussion. Being in a team of taijutsu freaks gave her the chance to see quite clearly what the symptoms of that particular ailment were. Tenten raised a hand. Good, you're awake. Tell me, how many fingers am I holding up? The boy said nothing. Tenten was worried that something worse was afflicting him, and thinking about taking him to a hospital, when he suddenly jumped to his feet and started shouting in a voice disturbingly reminiscent of the colored beasts. The fact that he was saying it in ye old tongue made Tenten begin to worry for her safety. Then things got worse. So much worse. When Naruto opened his eyes, he was blinded by a vision of such unparalleled beauty that he could do naught but stare in wonder. An angel outlined in a halo of light stared down at him with infinite tenderness and love. Who was this marvelous beauty that looked at him with eyes of gold and honey? She was saying something to him, and he struggled to hear her velvet words, but the ringing in his head prevented him from doing so. Still, he had a clue as to what she was saying, and he would respond to those passionate feelings. Jumping up, Naruto gave a low bow, his knees bending as he swept a hand at the lady. She glanced at him coyly as he spoke. My fair maiden, verily am I overjoyed to say that I accept thy words of compassion and care with all my heart. For it be with great pleasure that I may stand in the presence of such a beauty as thou. Please, what is thy name? Tenten Changyi, she stuttered out. Tenten. Ah, such a beautiful name. Mine, my dear maiden, is Naruto Uzumaki, future ruler of the world. He pushed a fist to his heart and raised his head, noting that she studiously observed his every move. Ah, yes. He was winning her over. It must have been fate that brought us star-crossed lovers to this point. And though thou may have struck me down with all thy glory, know that I was not affected, for I was struck down not by violence, but by love. Naruto knelt on one knee, grabbing the maiden's hands and clasping them lovingly with his own. Though we may have just met, I know with all my heart that we were meant for each other. And so, though it embarrasses me to be so upfront with my desires, I have one request I must make of you. He pulled the goddess closer, so close their lips almost touched. Please, I beg of thee. Bear my children. Tenten took the time to go over the situation. Yup, that was enough. With pure clarity, she fell back on the physical teachings of Guy and immediately made her counterattack. Standing up, she spun on her toes and performed a perfect roundhouse kick, catching the creepy kid under the chin with a cry of pervert, launching him through the air and causing him to smash into one of the trees behind him. Naruto shook his head as felt himself regain full control of his body. Ah, so embarrassing to lose control of his actions like that. He glanced sheepishly at the girl who had attacked him in self-defense. She was watching him cautiously, though there was still a bit of concern in her body language. He laughed nervously. Ah haha, sorry about that. Tenten narrowed her eyes. You're not gonna try anything stupid again, are you? She retrieved the Guan Dao from the dummy, leveling it at him threateningly. Because if you do, I'm not going to hold back this time. You were holding back. Naruto prodded at his jaw. Yup, definitely dislocated. So that's why it hurt to talk. He slammed a palm into his jaw from below, popping it back into place. Awesome. I mean. The brunette glared at him. He chuckled. No, that won't happen again. He made sure to be perfectly still, lest he be skewered like Anko's beloved Dango. I think I'm a bit woozy after you hit me. Tenten quirked an eyebrow. The kunai or the kick? Naruto shifted his jaw a bit before looking back at her. Yes. She stared at him for another second before sighing and putting herself at ease, lobbing the guandao up so the wooden pole was stuck in the ground. She leaned on it, pursing her lips. You always hit on girls in such an antiquated fashion. She asked sarcastically. Only the cute ones, he responded. She snorted in response. Naruto frowned. And when I'm suffering from mild head trauma, he added as an afterthought. That caused her to laugh a bit. There'd definitely have to be something wrong with your brain if you think something like that would work on girls. You'd be surprised. Naruto stood up, brushing away the dirt and crushed leaves from his clothes. Girls usually fall for the delirious noble samurai guy crap. Tenten snorted again. I'm not like most girls. So I noticed. A real smile surfaced from Tenten's lips. Maybe there was more to this blonde weirdo than she first thought. She shrugged and turned around, going to pick up the various weapons she had dropped around the training ground. My name is Tenten, in case that second blow knocked the memory out. The boy grinned maliciously. Naruto Uzumaki, future leader of the elemental countries. Tenten turned around. You were serious with that? I thought it was just part of your spiel. Naruto smirked and rocked back and forth on his heels. Oh, I'd never joke about that. I'm quite serious about my ambitions of world domination. Oh really? She smiled sardonically. And how exactly do you plan on doing that? Last I heard the various countries weren't exactly clamoring to be taken over. Tenten, don't you believe in me? The weapon mistress turned around, the axe hanging at her hip, both her hands placed on either side of her waist. Her expression was a mix of disbelief and playful curiosity. Naruto stuck his tongue out. I'm gonna become Hokage, and then make my way across the continent, taking over every country that's in my way. Soon, no one will be able to walk around without knowing the name Naruto Uzumaki and the significance it holds. I'll become a household name. They'll even name a brand after me, Uzumaki, Inc. Yeah, Tenten couldn't help but laugh at the proud look on the shorter boy's face. He was a strange kid, but he was certainly interesting to be around. He'd fit right in on her team. Tenten took the time to shudder. She didn't want to think how the boy's attitude would react to Guy and Lee. For some reason, a sense of foreboding swept over her for a moment and then was gone the next. It's not wise to tempt Lady Luck, especially when she has such a vested interest in the lad. She called over to Naruto. Well, are you just gonna stand there, or are you gonna tell me why you were here in the first place? No harm in having a conversation with the boy. What was the worst that could happen? He shrugged and pulled a shuriken out of a target. Spinning it expertly on his finger, he said, nothing really. Heard some noise and thought I'd check it out. Saw you playing with those weapons, and, well. Tenten scowled as she waited for the condescending insults that would come. Every boy she had met, with the exception of her teammates, said it was stupid for a girl to be a ninja. Kunoichi could never be as good as male shinobi, so why even bother? Course, she kicked their asses quickly after that, but their sentiments never changed. And just when she met someone who might actually become a friend, he had to go and ruin it by, you were kick-ass. Man, the way you handled those weapons was awesome. Complimenting her skills. Tenten's mouth hung open a bit as Naruto blithely continued his assessment. You're still a bit clunky with your movements, but the way you seamlessly switch between weapon styles is great. Wielding a halberd then an axe has to be hard, the weight distribution is completely different, and you have to shift your center of gravity to accommodate the change. A beginner can't do that, and yet you do it so easily and quickly. Tenten's mouth grew dry. You actually noticed. Aha. I know a bit about weapons, so. He walked over and picked up the scythe, weighing it in his hands. Take this one, for instance. He looked down the edge. You used a ferric titanium alloy for the blade, right? Tenten jumped at the opportunity to flaunt her weapon and metallurgy knowledge. Yeah, it's just as hard as normally tempered steel but has a 20% reduction in its weight, leading to easier handling. Naruto walked over to a decapitated dummy and gave it a practice swing. But scythes rely on the momentum of the swing to deal damage. If you decrease the weight, then it won't cause as much of a wound. She nodded and plucked it from his hands. Running her finger across the blade, she explained, I know, that's why I increased the angle of its arc. By doing so, it cuts quicker, making it less necessary to add extra force to achieve the same effect. Naruto grinned. I hadn't considered that. Oh. Did you hear about this? If you mix iron shavings and hand soap, you can. For the next couple hours, the two discussed various blacksmithing and weapon usage tips. Tenten was absolutely delighted that she had found someone who would talk to her about her favorite subject and could actually keep up with her theories. Normally whenever she got started on weapons, the person would politely talk to her for a little while, but would be quickly scared off by some of her more radical ideas. Naruto was in heaven. Why did he not meet this girl before? Where was she all his life? What had he been doing when such an exquisite woman was there all along? Ironically, the two had met during the 1 year they shared at the Ninja Academy. However, at the time, Tenten was too focused on her studies, and Naruto was, well, too Naruto-ish to actually care about women. Yes, they are idiots, aren't they? Tenten caught herself before her words became too rapid for human comprehension. It was absolutely thrilling to have someone to talk to like this. So, how come you're so knowledgeable about weapons? I mean, I'm the daughter of blacksmiths, so it's in my blood, but how about you, Naruto-kun? What's your reason? A devilish grin crept onto Naruto's face. He fished inside his duster for a bit before pulling out a small, multifaceted and segmented orb. This is why I like weapons so much. Tenten narrowed her eyes as she scrutinized the ball. What is it? Looks like a huge playing dice. It looked like a metal ball that had been folded and twisted in on itself again and again. This is a specialty of mine. I call them Kinzoku Jutsu. Think of them as a new elemental technique that revolves around weapons. She had to prevent herself from drooling as she considered the possibilities of his words. What does it do? She asked giddily. His grin grew even nastier. Wanna find out? She merely nodded. The blonde chuckled and grabbed her hand, dragging her behind one of the trees. Putting his finger to his lips, he gathered the orb in one hand and pressed down on a small indentation that vaguely fitted his thumb. Naruto kissed the device. Fly, my shuriken shutatsu. With a fling of his arm, he tossed the jutsu into the clearing. It seemed to hang in the air before rapidly unfolding. With a cacophony of ticking, clockwork connectors unwound from each other to form small daggers that snapped around into shuriken. The mini-weapons flung themselves en masse around the training ground, slicing into trees and ricocheting off objects as they searched for whatever targets they could slash. After what seemed like forever, the shuriken finally expended their structure and broke, tinkling to the ground in a rain of scrap metal. Naruto stood up and looked at what madness he had wrought. The clearing was even worse for wear than before. Thousands of nicks and cuts covered every tree, dummy, and target. This was no large-scale destruction, but rather an infinite number of grazes that wore everything down to the bitter core. The Jinchuriki turned to see what kind of reaction was on Tenten's face. He was baffled to see not shocked awe, but a rather evil glee that was all her own. The weapon mistress took a look at what the boy's weapon had done before glancing back at him. She smirked. Not bad. But it's still nothing compared to my techniques. Naruto rose to her challenge. Oh, really? I'd like to see that. You asked for it. Twin scrolls shot to her hands and were unfurled. The eloquent calligraphy glowed briefly before the clearing was shrouded in smoke, and 2 dragons flew into the sky. Sushuryu. That clinched it. He was so in love. Today was a magnificent day to be alive. Naruto hummed a mindless tune as he floated down the street. An eerie smile was plastered on his face and had refused to leave for the last hour. People instinctively moved to the other side of the street to avoid the boy. Rumors about him had led to the belief that when he owned such an expression, things tended to have their anatomical structure disintegrated in various unpleasant ways. To be honest, they weren't that far off. It was more of a weakening of the molecular structure of objects via meticulous, pinpoint ruin. leading to a chemical reaction of epic proportions, but the result was essentially the same. Boom boom. Seems like Konoha's citizens can learn not to step on the fox's tail. Good for them, they'll live longer. Naruto brushed aside the banner for Ichiraku's, stepping happily into the ramen stand. He had to celebrate such a glorious event, and what better way than with a bowl of the best food in town. He was surprised to find that Enko was already there, splitting her attention halfway between eating a bowl of ramen and sniping at the daughter of the stand's owner. Enko Haim, I am Nei-chan, he muttered dreamily. How are you? Enko spun around so quickly her neck almost snapped. Her eyes widened evilly at the boy, a perverted leer spreading to her lips. Naru-chan. She squealed. Whatever are you doing here? He's probably here for his favorite dish, Enko-san. I am frowned stormily when Enko ensnared the young boy by his shoulders. Why that little? What I don't understand is why you're here. Didn't you say our food was pig slop? When you're starving, even garbage seems appetizing, Enko grinned back nastily. The two stared at each other with unveiled hatred. Enko's hands twitched at her kunai holder while Ayam gripped her ladle so hard her knuckles turned white and popped. Tucci came out from the back, wiping his hands on his apron. Seeing his best customer at his reserved stool, a fond smile appeared. He began walking towards the boy. Naruto-kun. How are you, Dad? Ayam barked. Right, back I go. The man made a strategic retreat back into the kitchen. Ayam broke her Medusa glare from Enko, her face totally transforming into a sweet, tender smile as she focused back on her snuggle toy. What can I get for you, Naruto-kun? She asked, her voice dripping with saccharin. One Naruto special, please, Naruto responded, his tone still distracted. Ayam nodded and yelled the order back to Tucci, who wisely decided not to say anything back. Ayam leaned on the counter with her elbows, chin in hands, just looking at the blonde. Enko snapped up a clump of noodles and looked at the boy. Naruto was acting strange. Well, stranger than normal anyway. What's up with you, Naru-chan? Your brain finally melt 'cause of all those fumes you inhale. Naruto glanced at Enko before sighing joyfully. I'm in love. The stand froze. Ah, he continued, unmindful of the change in his environment. My beautiful metal goddess. The air became heavier, harder to breathe. Storm clouds started to gather around the marketplace, laden with lightning that flashed cruelly. Several civilians gave cries of fright as rodents and vermin came flocking down the streets and into the woods in waves, as if chased by some unknown, ferocious entity. Enko bit cleanly through her chopsticks. Ayam's hair frizzled out as the bowl in her hands crumbled to dust. In the darkness of the oncoming storm, their eyes had an unearthly amber glow. Oh, really? Enko's voice was cracked, deepening and increasing in pitch at random. That's nice. Yes, very, very, nice. Ayam's smile grew wider, making her lips look like they had split her head horizontally. What's the name of this girl? Ten. Naruto murmured. Ten. The whisper hung in the air, sinister and waiting. For years to come, people would hear it quietly echo in the dark of night, and feel as though their very soul was being stolen from out of their body. And what does she look like? Naruto sighed again. Her hands are burnt by the roaring flames of progress, her fingers cut by her sensuous dance with metal and its children. Those hands are so soft with newborn objects, and yet so hard when reaping the lives of others. How about something a little more definite? She smells like oil and burning wood, of sweat and sparks. No, like hair and eye color. Her hair is the finest silk, bereft of any flaws, and her eyes shine like diamonds waiting to cut through any that oppose her. Enko's fingers ripped off a chunk of the counter. Ayam went through another 2 bowls. No, I mean, is she blonde or a redhead? Does she have green or blue eyes? How easily does she bleed, and is her neck thin enough to wrap your hands around? Naruto paused. He pursed his lips together and thought on it, his eyes darting up and to the right. He shrugged. I don't know. He looked down to see his order in front of him. Why? Ramen. He quickly dove in. Ayam and Enko stood stock still. Someone was threatening their share of blonde ass. Someone had to die a very nasty, disturbing, and nightmare-inducing death. And then, when it was over, Naruto would come for comfort and he would hug them and pet them and kiss them and take off his pants. Tsuchi watched from the safety of his workspace after sneaking Naruto's order to him. The two women were off in Fantasyland, their face caught in a cycle of lust and glee. Naruto, blissfully ignorant, ravaged his meal. Tsuchi sighed. He had tried so hard to raise I.M. as a single father after his wife died, and now the teenaged girl was considering murder and statutory rape, not necessarily in that order. He cried silently, his tears mixing in with the broth. Oh, where had he gone wrong? Team 7 reporting the completion of their mission. Ah, thank you, Kakashi. Now, Sarutobi looked up from the mission assignments and stopped midway. An eyebrow rose in annoyed bemusement. Care to tell me what happened this time? Team 7 was not in the best post-mission shape. Every member was covered in soot, burned in various places, and smoking slightly. Kakashi looked amused, Sakura seemed extremely bothered, Sasuke had his customary blank scowl, and Naruto was grinning proudly. Tora meowed a puff of smoke from on top his perch of Naruto's head, random singed splotches all over his fur. During our capture of Tora, the target got into another scuffle with the genin, and Naruto became a little too trigger-happy with his explosives. Another being the third time in 2 weeks. Honestly, the cat had better stealth and escape skills than most genin. Naruto pounded out a thumbs up. It was a battle for the ages. Sakura smacked him in the back of the head. You set fire to the area. And then you blew it up some more. Naruto grinned sheepishly. Well, you know what they say about fight fire with fire. They don't mean it literally. Sasuke-kun didn't seem too bothered with following through with that saying. By the way. He turned to the Uchiha Scion and swatted his shoulder. Awesome application of the Gakakyu. You got, like, 20 square feet off that technique. Sasuke coughed and looked off to the side, but the small smirk on his lips was unmistakable. Yes, well. Kakashi shrugged and turned back to Sarutobi. You get the basic gist of it, of course. Sarutobi signaled that Naruto hand over the cat to his owner, the Fire Daimyo's wife. The cat did not seem pleased with the situation, but his bionic body could easily withstand even a ton of pressure, so the woman's death holds were little more than an annoyance. Naruto saluted the brave cat's plight regardless. Seeing that the client was satisfied, Sarutobi turned back to the genin squad. Now, as for your next mission, ho, my eternal rival, Kakashi. It would seem we meet again. Kakashi mentally sighed. He knew that voice. Turning around, he found the great green beast of Konoha, with his genin team, grinning at him predatorily. Oh great, he just ran into with the man last week. And now he'd meet Guy when both of their teams were in tow. He could already hear the declaration that the taijutsu expert would. I knew that you had a cute genin team to call your own, but this is the first time I've seen them. They look like they have the flames of youth within them. How marvelous. Yep, there it was. Kakashi fell back on his tried-and-true method of dealing with the man. Flipping out his Ika, he shoved his nose into it while giving off a disinterested tone. You say something, oh. Guy shouted, his teeth sparkling. I was waiting for that hip reply, my rival. Naruto had a very different reaction when he saw who else was in the Spandex Man's team. Ten. He squealed with delight. Ten thought she recognized that wild bush of blonde hair. Hi, Naruto-kun, she responded politely. She hadn't seen the boy in the few days since their first meeting. The two never thought to make a second appointment. How've you been? Oh, I'm great. Naruto was so happy. He got to meet his metal goddess again. Oh, his face was growing so flushed, and his head becoming so hot. He noted how Ten, not to mention the rest of her team, was staring at him. No, don't look at me so passionately. I'll burst into flames. Naruto, your hair's on fire. Naruto broke out his ardor-induced daze and patted the top of his head. Ah man, again. He thought his hair was still smoldering. He was splashed with water, extinguishing the flame. Looking to the side, he saw Sakura holding an empty glass with an exasperated look on her face. Naruto smiled. Thanks, Sakura-chan. Guy faltered for a second before shifting into his flaming demeanor. I see that one of your students truly has the flames of youth within him, Kakashi. Kakashi winced. That was in poor taste, even for your, Guy. Guy laughed, ignoring the insult. Very well, allow me to introduce my own cute students. This is Tenten Changyi, Niji Hyuga, and my cutest disciple, Rock Lee. He slapped both hands on the boy's shoulder with a fond, paternal smile. Tenten waved at Team 7. Nice to meet you. Niji merely gave a glance before shutting his eyes. Good afternoon. Lee clenched a fist. Oh. It is a pleasure to meet all of you. Sakura, feeling that it was polite to give their own introductions, started first. My name's Sakura Haruno. Sasuke HNN Ed. Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto snapped a thumb at his face. And I'm Naruto Uzumaki, future ruler of the world. The people who had heard his unique introduction before blanched. Was he going to say the same thing to every person that he met? Yash! That is indeed a youthful goal. Guy cried out. Several people covered their ears at the deafening noise. My own student, Lee, is attempting to become the best taijutsu specialist in the world. And if I do not reach that goal, I will run 500 laps around Konoha. And if you cannot finish, I will do 1,000 push-ups with just my pinky finger. Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. The other two members of Team Guy turned pale. Tenten tackled a random passerby Chunin while Niji did the same to another. Duck and cover. Kakashi blocked the sight of Guy and Lee colliding with his body from Sakura and Sasuke. He didn't worry too much about Naruto. Kakashi doubted that it could make the boy any worse, mentally. Thus, Naruto caught the full brunt of the sunset and sea illusion. He froze. When the two green-clad males separated, he did nothing for a few seconds, and then began stroking his chin. Interesting. A genjutsu caused by the amalgamation of two highly emotional reactions, creating a unique brainwave that directly attacks the psyche via the optical nerve. He tapped his lips. I wonder if it can be used for interrogation purposes. Ibiki-kun should be told of this discovery. The entire room felt as though the apocalypse had descended, save for Lee and Guy. Kakashi shivered as something gripped his heart when Naruto spun around to stare at him, a curious look in his eyes. Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi instinctively smacked the boy across the room. Naruto crashed through two desks and a bookshelf before jumping up and trying to tackle the jounin again. Kakashi-sensei. The others watched a human-sized version of pinball being played as Naruto catapulted around the room, knocking over furniture and people in his quest to hug the silver-haired jounin. The deadly battering continued for several minutes before Kakashi finally grabbed the blonde and suplexed him into the ground. He was startled when it burst into smoke. Looking around, he was annoyed to see everyone laughing at him. Where'd he go? Kakashi growled out. Sarutobi waved his pipe at the door. He chased after Guy's team after the 8th try. Something about getting bored. His teammates followed him. The genin really seemed to hit it off. Kakashi felt something break deep inside of him. Yash! I'm glad to see my students getting along so well with my eternal rivals. This will be the start of a wonderful friendship. Who? Sakura and Sasuke shared a glance with each other. They still couldn't believe Naruto had so easily slipped a clone into his attack on Kakashi. They didn't notice the switch at all until he had gone chasing after Guy and his team, talking animatedly with them like they had been dear friends since birth. Seeing that their sensei was preoccupied, they decided to just hell with it and check out the other team as well. It was a most enlightening experience. Guy was probably as strange as Kakashi was, just in a different manner. The scariest part of the interaction between both teams had to be Naruto's behavior around Tenten. The boy acted so much like a fangirl that it even perturbed Sakura. What compounded the horror was what the two were discussing. As soon as they had caught up, the weapon-obsessed maniacs had sunk into a fevered conversation about the pros and cons of various bladed instruments that contained the words wound, blood, and massive, soul-wrenching pain much too often. As one, the remaining 4 genin looked at each other, a single thought passing through their gaze. Oh gods, not another one. Guy took it another way, which, sadly and terrifyingly, was so much closer to the truth and yet so much farther away at the same time. Yash! It seems the flames of youth have brought Tenten-chan and Naruto-kun into a wonderful, blooming relationship. Tenten flushed at the implication and chucked a kunai at her teacher. Guy-sensei. It's not like that. She didn't hit him. Naruto tittered and covered his blushing cheeks. Kaya, Guy-sensei. You're embarrassing me. The bomb he had rolled at Guy's feet did not miss. The remains of Team Guy blinked at the pockmark that had once been their Jounin teacher. Then they looked at Naruto. The boy was still giggling and blushing furiously as though he had not just blown up someone. Sakura and Sasuke just twitched a couple times, but for the most part took it in stride. It would appear that the flames of youth burn even brighter in you than I had originally anticipated. Superb. Everyone except Naruto swiveled to find Guy none the worse for wear, excluding the singing of his massive eyebrows. Though, perhaps it would be best that I keep my mouth shut concerning the youthfulness of my students' romantic endeavors. That's right, Guy-sensei. You should know that a maiden's heart is a very pure and delicate thing. Tenten coughed at the stern look in Naruto's eyes. Well, it was kind of nice for him to protect her honor, sort of, maybe. Thanks, Naruto-kun. I was talking about my heart. Hear that muted, exploding noise? That's the sound of a mass aneurysm. Besides, it's obvious I like Tenten. She's a girl, she makes her own weapons, and then she stabs things with them. What much more does a guy need? There went a second collective brain burst, this time accompanied by a facial capillary implosion in a certain bun-haired girl's face. Lee was the first to recover from the sudden brain hemorrhage. His boiling blood was particularly useful for curing massive internal bleeding. Yash! Naruto-san's youthful exclamation has made me want to make my own. He turned his fierce eyes to Sakura. The girl, like most animals, realized her own imminent doom. Sakura-san. Please be mine. It was love at first sight. I promise I'll protect you with my life. His teeth shined with an ephemeral brightness. Naruto cupped his hands around his mouth. Who? Go for it, Lee-senpai. Sakura jerked back as though she had been hit with a right cross. You, no way. You're totally out of line. Lee's head sunk at the harsh refusal. Guy materialized next to him and slapped him on the shoulder. Do not worry, my cute student. Simply keep trying and get stronger, and I'm sure Sakura-kun will eventually fall for you. No, I won't. Lee looked up, tears gathered in his eyes. Ah really, Guy-sensei? Of course. Guy-sensei. Lee, Guy-sensei. Cue insanity-causing hug. Naruto was, once again, the only person to watch them. Something twinged in the back of his brain. I taste purple. Guy-sensei. I can feel the flames roaring in my soul again. Lee twisted and settled in a taijutsu stance. Sasuke Uchiha, I challenge you to a match. I wish to test my prowess against the scion of Konoha's famous Uchiha clan. Sasuke shook his head to rid it of the remaining blood buildup, his lips curling into his self-important sneer. And why should I accept? Because if as the rookie of this year's genin, you should be prepared to fight for the worthiness of that title. Interesting. Sasuke swiped a finger across his nose and tensed up, his right foot sliding back. Fine then, I accept. Yeah, it's a duel. Let's see some dirty fighting. I wanna see someone get kicked in the family jewels. For once in your life, Naruto Dobe, shut up. Ho, this looks like it'll be an exciting matchup. Guy intervened between the two genin. He smiled at Sasuke. Your sensei and I have been rivals for a long time now. The score between us is 48-48. It'll be interesting to see how his students do against my own. Should it work out the way I think, I'll have another victory to hold over him. Sasuke smirked. Don't think I'll lose so easily. Your student will be the one to hang his head in shame. Yash! I'm all fired up. Naruto watched as Guy set up the rules. When the two began their fight, he ignored it for something more worthy of his time. He knew how this match would end, after all. Natural talent versus hellish training and hard work, the ultimate rivalry. Still, Sasuke was going to have to swallow a very bitter pill. Walking over to Neji, he caught the Hyuga's attention. Yo, Neji-han. The long-haired boy spared one look with his milky white eyes before looking back at the fight. He wanted to see Sasuke's fighting style, he had no time for some stupid loser. What do you want? Nothing. Naruto put his hands behind his head. Just thought we could talk. I have no words for a loser like you, really? That sounds a little harsh considering we've just met. Fate decides all matters of a person's life at birth. I knew from the moment that I saw you that fate had ordained you as below others, including myself. And Sasuke-kun isn't. He is of a noble birth, and therefore deserves the respect given to him. Cause of the Sharingan being a derived version of the Byakugan, Neji subtly looked at Naruto. It was a mostly unknown fact that the Uchiha's cherished Dijitsu was a further mutation of the Hyugas. Only a handful of people outside either clan knew of it, and yet somehow this know-nothing brat had found it out. There was more to Naruto than he had initially assumed. That is correct. He directed his attention back to the spar. Naruto leaned forward, twiddling his thumbs. Yeah, but I hear that both of your clans aren't on very good terms with each other. He slightly turned his head ever so much. I guess main and branch families and clans will never quite get along. You could almost say it's a cursed relationship. Neji swung over to face Naruto. What did you, ooh? That's gotta hurt. Naruto jumped up from his seat, running to the finished fight. Sasuke had taken a sharp kick to the chin, sending him flying up and crashing back to the ground. Sakura squealed in concern and rushed to the defeated boy's side, helping him up. Sasuke shoved her attentive hand away, rubbing the bruise that was forming on his jaw and scowling at the crowing victor. I won, Gai-sensei. I won. Very good, Lee. I'm proud of you. Lee, you jerk. How dare you hurt Sasuke-kun like that? Lee wilted under Sakura's verbal barrage. But Sakura-san, I was just. Now, Sakura-chan. Naruto patted the pinkette's shoulder. She shivered at his tone and smile. He did his very best. You can't insult Lee-senpai just 'cause he won. It's insulting to Sasuke who also did his best. Why, I'm sure that after Sasuke-kun trains some more, he'll be able to beat Lee-senpai without breaking a sweat. Naruto bent over and smiled at the kneeling boy. Ain't that right? Sasuke paused in his harsh retort. There was something in Naruto's eyes that was familiar, nostalgic. What was it? Sasuke shook his head and chuckled under his breath. The smirk whipped itself back across his face. He stood up. Yeah, next time, you're dead meat. Yosh. I look forward to the rematch. Wow. Naruto clapped his hands together loudly. After seeing such an awesome fight, I want to have a scuffle, too. Lee-senpai. How about a quick bout? Naruto. Sakura yelled. If Sasuke-kun couldn't beat Lee, what makes you think you can? You could never beat Sasuke-kun once. Ah, come on, Sakura-chan. Tenten joined the conversation, Naruto's pseudo-confession still lingering in her mind. Naruto-kun, you really should reconsider. He was a nice guy, if probably completely bonkers, but she didn't want to see him beaten to a pulp. Lee-kun's one of the genin's prestige taijutsu users. Naruto's eyes sparkled. Ah, Tenten, you care. Yeah, of course I do. You're a friend, she said, emphasizing the word. She didn't want to lead the boy on, after all. And friends don't let other friends get their skulls caved in. I'm sure Lee-senpai wouldn't go that far, right? Yosh. Though I would never do so intentionally, I'm afraid my youthfulness may sometimes leap out of my control. See? It's fine. It's not fine at all. Irregardless. Lee-senpai. Naruto brandished his hand in a come forth gesture. I challenge you to a duel. I accept. Though because of Sakura-san's and Tenten-san's concerns, I will do so with a handicap. Lee wrapped a cloth around his left arm and secured it around his waist. I will fight you with one hand tied. Oh, Lee. Your thoughtfulness makes me swell with pride. Gai-sensei. Lee. The group looked at Naruto. He shrugged. What? I wanna fight. Oh, that reminds me. Hey, Sasuke-kun. What? I bet you that I'll beat Lee-senpai when you couldn't. I doubt that. Does that mean you'll accept? Sasuke's eyebrows twitched at Naruto's happy-go-lucky tone. Yeah, sure, whatever. Okay, then. You'll owe me one favor if I win the bet. Fine. He scowled at Naruto's gleeful face. What the heck was the psychotic dope planning? Maybe he shouldn't have accepted the bet. Well, he was in for it now, so he might as well go along for the ride. The contenders took their spots at the makeshift arena. Lee settled back into his Gukken stance. Naruto just put his weight on his right leg, his arms looped behind his head. He grinned at Lee's confused stare and motioned for him to begin. Lee took the offer and started. He darted across the field, striking Naruto straight in the face with a punch. Naruto went flying back, his arms flailing around. Lee felt a small jerk on his arm when he pulled back, but found nothing there. Naruto put a thumb to his nose, wiping away the blood. "That was great, Lee-senpai. I couldn't even see you move." Lee swallowed nervously. "Naruto-san, are you sure you wish to continue?" "Of course. Come on, hit me with your best shot." Lee shakily accepted and rushed in again. Each time he lashed out, Naruto took the blow head-on. He could barely dodge each hit, even with Lee restrained to 3 limbs, and his attempted attacks were pathetic by comparison, each one missing the mark by a mile. What was strange, however, was not Naruto's enthusiasm in being hit and refusal to quit, but rather the speed at which the boy recovered and the tug on Lee's arm or legs each time he attacked with them. With each pull, the sensation became clearer and easier to distinguish. It was cold and hard and thick, wrapping around him before suddenly disappearing before he had the chance to see the culprit. It bothered him, but he would not split his attention when Naruto was obviously giving Lee all of his. Lee saw Naruto falter and decided to end it. No use in stretching out what was nothing more than a public beating. He ran forward, intending to knock Naruto down in one decisive blow. His foot reached forward. Naruto grinned capriciously. "Gotcha." He snapped his fingers. The dirt underneath Lee's foot glowed blue before lightning struck his leg and traveled up his spine. Lee was paralyzed for a moment. It was all the chance Naruto needed. Kinton, Hibi Kasari. Chains erupted from Naruto's sleeves, 2 from each one. They undulated like living snakes before striking their victim. The chains wrapped themselves around the spandex-clad genin, glowing with a small blue haze of chakra. Lee found himself totally bound by the combination of the paralysis seal and chakra-enhanced shackles. He recognized the feel of the metal, it was what had kept tugging at him. Naruto grinned in triumph. But still, he had to make sure. Retrieving a capsule from his coat, he tossed it at Lee. "Yay! I win." Lee watched as the capsule drew closer. Did this mean he lost? He lost to someone who used cheap tricks? No. He wouldn't allow this. He wouldn't. Straining against his binding, Lee grabbed the chains. "I won't lose. Not like this." With a bestial yell, Lee pulled as hard as he could. Naruto was yanked off his feet and towards the boy. His eyes widened as the capsule opened with him in the proximity of the blast. Green gel exploded from the bomb, swelling up to huge proportions and swallowing up the 2 genin inside of it. When it grew to its full size, a loud, long hiss escaped, and before long the gel became firm and spongy. Naruto and Lee looked at each from a foot away, but their limbs couldn't move enough for them to escape. Naruto tilted his head and laughed. "Oops. Guess that didn't work as well as I thought. You yanked me over really hard, Lee-senpai. It was like I was flying." Lee frowned. "I am disappointed, Naruto-san. I had thought the duel we would have would be an honorable and fair one, and not involve cheap parlor tricks." Naruto smiled crookedly. "We're ninja, Lee-senpai. We're supposed to fight dirty. But I know what you mean. Still, did you really think you were the only one who put all his worth into being the best at one thing? You're not the only one who sacrificed something." Lee's eyes grew confused. Naruto leaned forward and whispered something into his ear, then gently rapped his skull against Lee's. Lee's eyes widened. Naruto grinned mischievously. Lee threw his head back and laughed. "Yosh. I see, Naruto-kun. I have made an egregious error. Your flames of youth are strong, maybe even stronger than mine. Therefore, I lose this match and declare you as my eternal rival." "Really?" Naruto blinked and his grin grew. "Who? I have a rival." Now he had someone to foil his nefarious plots. It wouldn't be nearly as much fun to be an overlord without someone to defy him. Guy, who had been listening in on the conversation, performed his nice guy pose. "Yosh. It would seem that the match is over, and my cute student has admitted his loss. Thus I declare Naruto-kun the winner." "Yeah. I rock. Ha, I own you now, Sasuke-kun." Sasuke scowled. Internally he was still pissed, but he did find Naruto's use of his Kinzoku Jutsu to be rather clever. He had to pay the piper, but seeing what Naruto did made Sasuke want those techniques all the more, and he still had the chance of getting them. Fine. Yay. Sasuke's gonna buy us all ramen. Hey, wait a moment. Now someone chip us out. The sealing gel from my Niba Bakudan is making me itch in places that aren't appropriate to scratch in public. Allow me to take that. Sakura grabbed the sledgehammer that Tenten had retrieved from her sealing scrolls. Oh, that's a Byakugan hammer, Sakura-chan. What are you gonna— Hey, wait, that's not the right spot. Sakura. Wham! Naruto looked around, his eyes taking meticulous note of his surroundings. Dingy, moss and bile-covered walls. Something rattled above him. Poorly and randomly laid out pipes. He raised his foot, the soaked boot making a squelching sound. Ground flooded with what looks like the runoff from the waste treatment facility. He pursed his lips, his eyes narrowing pensively. There can only be one explanation for all this. He slammed a fist into his other hand and squared his shoulders. Sakura-chan must have hit me so hard she plowed me straight through the ground into Konoha's sewer network. Which is kind of weird, cause I'm pretty sure there was only bedrock in the area we were at. Man, I didn't know she had such a strong arm. Deciding to try and find his way out, Naruto considered his options. He could either wander around aimlessly, or devise a thoroughly thought-out plan that took into account the flow of the sewer's river, the number of pipelines that fed into the main one he was currently in, and the age of the section's construction to discover precisely where he was and go home. He was tired after all that had happened and just wanted to go to bed. The choice was obvious. Mindlessly wander, it is. And I'm gonna go. He spun in a circle and then threw his finger out. That way. Obvious for him, not for a normal person. Naruto trekked his way through the sewer. It was stinky and slimy and altogether pretty gross. Which, he noted, made it perfect for an alternative base since no one would ever want to come down here. Now, if he could just figure out a way to drain the pipe without causing a major backup in all of Konoha's toilets, he'd be peachy. Plus the sewer was getting kind of repetitive. Nothing changed. After what seemed like a couple of hours, Naruto finally came across a landmark that was completely different from the rest of the landscape. A giant cage stood in front of him, with a small slip of paper with the character "for seal" written on it. Naruto frowned. A seal? Bah! Nothing could contain him, let alone some scrappy piece of paper. Not a cage or a seal or the giant fox creature that was lying on the other side of the cage, or even a— He paused. There, curled up, was a giant demonic-looking fox. Its fur was scarlet and sharp, each bristle standing out like the quills of a porcupine. Its visage looked like the bastard offspring of a fox and rabbit, which had then been beaten with the ugly stick for a good several days before having an anvil dropped on it. 9 monstrous tails swung lazily behind the creature, creating small gales that blew through the enclosed space. Golden eyes stared at him, their slitted pupils swimming with raw power. The fox opened its mouth. Its voice was deep and guttural, but strangely lacking in force or aggression. Hello, end-user Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto blinked. Then he blinked again, and then again. Then he tossed his arms up and let out a hollering whoop. Yay! I found the Kyubi. He paused and looked over his shoulder. You are the Kyubi no Kitsune, right? Greatest of the Bijou, near destroyer of Konoha, and all-around fuzzy little asshole. The Kyubi lowered its head so it was resting on the floor. I am Spursy Project, Legend, serial number 000, K9T. Codename, it stopped. A stream of letters and numbers ran down the height of its eyes. That data is missing from my memory. However, I believe I am the Kyubi of which you speak. Great. Naruto looked the great demon fox up and down. So, what exactly are you? I am a cyberorganic analytical machine created by Spursy to cultivate the use of the energy known as chakra. My secondary function is to act as the main server for Spursy digital archives. Tertiary functions are unknown. I am afraid that is also missing from my memory. So you're basically a giant walking, talking computer? That is correct. Kick ass. Anyway, how did I finally contact you? I've been trying since forever and nothing worked. Within the last couple of hours, your brain has experienced a great deal of mental stress. It caused a break in your subconscious which lowered the effectiveness of the seal, thereby allowing me to make contact with you when you became unconscious. Whatever the stress was caused by, I would not suggest allowing it to happen again. Repeated occurrences could completely shatter your mind. Naruto grinned maniacally. I knew it was an effective measure for cuddling cheese. It even let me contact the most dairy creature in the peanut. Bloboro. The Kyuubi looked down at the mortal that was running around like an idiot, babbling incoherent sentences. Perhaps the mental stress was having more of an effect than it thought. It hoped Naruto Uzumaki could still function properly. After all, this was its new end user, the person who would lead it to greater knowledge. It would no longer have to slowly feed the child half-eaten memories as it slept, hoping for the best. It now had direct access to the boy. It now had a purpose. Today was a good day to be a bijou. I am the Pumpkin King. Bow before my roundliness. Or maybe not. Oh make. Ramen combat. I am Nachan. It's me. I am twirled around, her face blossoming into a beautiful smile. Mr. Snugglebuns had arrived. She had been waiting so long for his next visit. With his downy hair and rosy cheeks and completely submissive attitude to being cuddled for hours on end, she couldn't imagine a more perfect boy. And now he had arrived to be molested, she meant hugged. Hugged? By her. I am nearly bowled her father over as she hurried to the counter. Naruto-kun. Her heels screeched across the ground when she saw the person accompanying her sweetie pie. Fishnet full bodysuit, luscious boobs that hung out, and an open trench coat that barely covered said boobs. Everything about the woman screamed femme fatale, from her sultry eyes to the way she held herself to the way that she hung on Naruto. Tsuchi winced when his new batch of miso soup turned to blood and nightmarish entities attempted to crawl out. He slammed a lid on it and shoved the pot into the oven, turning it to high. Through the screams that emitted from the oven, he peeked out at what was going outside. Just as he feared, another female was invading Iam's territory. Tsuchi sighed and picked up the phone to call his insurance company. Thank heavens he had taken out that possessive woman insurance out on Iam. Anko looked smugly at Iam as she draped an arm over Naruto, pushing his head further into her chest. Hi, how do you do? She drawled, extending a hand. I'm Anko. Nice to meet you, Anko-san. Iam accepted the offering and squeezed. A diamond could have been made from the pressure between their hands. I'm Iam. Naruto smiled happily. Ankoheim's a new friend of mine, Iam Nachan. I hope you can be friends, too. Iam felt herself melt as she looked at his eyes, those innocent, naive, so very exploitable eyes of his. How could she possibly refuse a request of his when he made that face? Sure, Naruto-kun, anything for you. Great. He scooched up in his stool and laid his hands on the counter. I'll start with 2 bowls of miso, 2 bowls of beef, and 5 bowls of chicken. He looked at the special jounin. How about you, Ankoheim? I'll just take a spicy shrimp. All right then, let me just tell Dad and I'll get your order right away. Anko watched as Iam disappeared into the kitchen. She licked her lips. Naruchan. He stopped singing ramen long enough to look at her. I'm gonna go to the little lady's room, Kay. Okay. He didn't know there was a ladies' room, though. Anko slinked from her seat and into the back of the ramen stand. She found her prey happily stirring at a pot of broth, her back turned. No one else was around. Perfect, Anko silently crept up on the girl before brandishing a kunai. Just one more step and, she swung her hand down. Iam spun around and knocked the kunai out of Anko's hand. Anko had to duck suddenly when Iam thrust at her with the ladle. It broke through the wall just inches above her head. When retrieved, the hole was perfectly circular and fit to the ladle's size. Only a great amount of force could have caused that without cracks. If it had hit her, she'd be missing a good deal of her head. Anko sidled to the side and stood back up. She licked her thumb. So, you felt me coming, huh? Not bad for a civilian. Iam fell backwards on her leg, holding the ladle at a downward angle. I won't let any harm come to Naruto-kun. You mean you just want to ravish him yourself? Is that a problem? Anko chuckled darkly. A girl after my own heart. Too bad I have to kill you. Iam mirrored the smile. I feel the same way. The two did not move. Each waited for the other to strike first. A second passed, then a few more. Finally, the tension snapped. Anko punched forward with both fists. Sanaijishu. Snakes flew from her sleeves, fangs dripping with venom. I grabbed the saucepan and batted them away. The snakes burst into smoke at the shock. She shoved the ladle into a pot full of ramen and then yanked it out. Shimtsukman. Noodles flowed along the ladle, forming a long, rubbery whip. I lashed out at Anko. The snake lady dodged, watching in distant awe as the whip wrapped itself around a steel beam and crushed it into a dense metallic blob. She shook it off and chucked some kunai at the ramen waitress. I countered with some kitchen knives. Curses and expletives were shouted back and forth as the violence escalated, the kitchen becoming a veritable war zone. Tucci leaned down and ruffled Naruto's hair from his safe position outside. "Hey, Naruto, how about we eat somewhere else?" "Ah," the boy whined. "I wanted some ramen. I'm afraid we're having some problems right now." "Come on, I'll buy you some barbecue." "Okay." Naruto jumped down from his stool and grabbed Tucci's hand. "Let's go, Tucci-ji-san." The two walked off into the sunset, leaving the carnage in the stand far behind. Tucci's premiums skyrocketed from then on. Kakashi-sensei. He was everywhere. No matter where he went, Kakashi would always be found and attacked. At first he thought it was just a joke. But then he discovered that it was far, far worse. Anywhere he went, he was there. Kakashi giggled as he bought the newest edition of Ika Ika. It was the limited, platinum edition of Volume 5. He had waited in line for 8 hours to get the book. And now it was his, all his. Kakashi found a cozy place to read in a cafe and opened the book up. Ah, nothing like a good read in a steaming hot cup of coffee. He lowered his mask to take a sip, wincing happily at the bite of the bitter drink. He was in heave. Kakashi-sensei. Note that boiling hot coffee is difficult to drink, but painful to wear. Especially when you wear it as an outer pair of pants. Plus, it's hard to get the stain out. Not to mention the searing pain. Kakashi examined the apples. He needed to go shopping more often, his produce kept growing that nasty white stuff on it whenever he turned his head. Granted, he usually turned his head for a good several days, but that was beside the point. He placed the apple back down. The melons were looking good, and they were on sale, too. Kakashi reached forward to pick one out when the stall began to tremble. The melons shifted as something orange and yellow leapt out of them. Kakashi-sensei. He could hear him. The night took away all noises except for that giggly call. It just wouldn't go away. Kakashi knew he was outside. He knew it. Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi pulled the covers over his head. He wanted his binky. Kakashi ambled his way to his team's meeting ground. And this time he was actually going to be punctual. That would throw those kids for a loop, especially that demonic little brat. Kakashi would show him what for. He wasn't some toy that could just be played with. He was one of the elite, the best of the best. Some wet-nosed punk couldn't break his spirit. Not him, not Kakashi of the Sharingan. Ah! Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi spun around, his eyes screwed shut. I give up. Here, take my body. I've refused for so long, but I can't take it anymore. Do what you want with me, but please, be gentle. He crossed his arms in front of his chest, bashfully looking at his feet. Nothing happened. A few seconds passed, and Kakashi opened his eyes and looked up. There stood Irika, his hand frozen in greeting. The Chunin gulped. Never mind. It was nothing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to do something, over there. Yeah, over there. Abandoning all pretenses, the man ran down the street as fast as he could. The number of times Kakashi Hatake had wept openly in public could be counted on one hand. That now increased to 2. Ugh! Where is that lazy ass? Sakura stomped her foot as she glared death at nothing in particular. He's a bit later than normal, and that's saying something. Naruto shrugged and lounged against the tree. Who knows? He closed his eyes, his lips smoothly forming words. Kakashi-sensei. That's it for part 2. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.